What's up, nerds? How's everybody doing today? Happy Tuesday to you all. We'll be starting in a moment. Yeah, I had a pretty good day. I live opposite schedule, so my day's kind of just getting started. That's not true. I had other things today. Today was a day of things that I had to do. Where are you guys? Let me see you. Boom! What's up, nerds? What's up, glorious creatures? How's everybody doing? Who's here today? Artist, how you doing? Sponge Man, nice to see you. Ricky Tick, welcome to the show. Lorgu, how's it going, buddy? YouTube unsubbed you for no reason. Well, come back, buddy. Rejoin us. Wheel, this is not the first time you've been to a live stream. Don't ask questions you know the answer to. You silly goose. Everybody knows that I manifest more of the flesh vessel for stream. Come on now. What's up, Gavinder? I'll never get the name right. What name? Frostoxin? The wheel? Lorgu? Lorg? It's supposed to be just be Lorg, right? Lorg? Lorgy? Lorge? Lorg. Alright, I'll just say Lorg. Is Lorg right? I just didn't want to... Listen, I see an L-O-R-G-U-E. I don't want to disrespect the U-E. You know? That UE is there. If we deny it, are we any better than the beasts? I don't think so. Yeah, it's harder to drink from my mug when I don't have arms or a throat and stomach and stuff. What's this playlist? This is my chill opening playlist. I have two opening playlists I use usually. One is my sort of pump up playlist and one is my chill. And I like using the chill one for the call-in shows. You say Tongu or Tungu? I say Tongu. Why did you just write the word twice? I'm confused. All right. Well, listen, guys. Today we're doing a little bit of a call-in show. A little bit of a Q&A. If you've never been to my stream before, and you're curious what the shtick is, that's the shtick. So basically, the way this is going to work is there is a Google form. You can access it on YouTube by looking in the video description. You can access it on Twitch by doing the command help. And you can post a question there. We've got a handful so far, and we're gonna roll through some and see what kind of things you guys are curious about. You can post them anonymously if you don't want to be associated with your question, or you can put your name on it. The other thing that I don't know if we're gonna we'll see how much time we have, but if we have enough time, later on we'll shift gears and we will start taking calls. So that's the plan for the day. You're here for a bit? What's up, Bildo? How's it going, buddy? Artist, don't be sad. Dan Parrish is trying to start a religious order in their D&D game. Any suggestions? What is the goal of the religious order? Is it a religious order that is a subsect of a larger religion? And if so, what differentiates it from that larger religion? And does that difference lead to conflict? Or does it lead to the opposite of conflict? Whatever you call that these days? That would be the first question I'd ask. What's up, Tom Bombadillo? It's your first time here, and you just followed me about 3 minutes ago. That's crazy. Well, welcome, buddy. Nice mug. Dude, you beat Redmer. I won't tell him if you don't. Clerical, thank you for the follow. Oh, yeah. Guys, I had a crazy encounter with the government today. But it was a good encounter. But it was crazy. I have passport stuff I need to figure out. But it was weirdly, it was not even crazy. It was just more helpful than I thought it would be. Normally, I expect when I'm dealing with government things, it's like about as tedious as it gets. So it's surprising when you call something and then they pick up in like less than a minute and then they answer your question like immediately, you know? It's crazy. You don't expect that much these days. What would you recommend, Fireball or Float, as an escape mechanic? Well, what do you mean by float? Do you mean like levitate? I don't think Fireball is an escape mechanic, but it could be. I don't think it actually helps you escape. It might help you, like, make an exit, or it might help you make a distraction, or it might help you kill a lot of guys. So if those are the ways you like escaping, it's a great escape. But if the way you're trying to escape is by floating away, or flying, or leaving quickly, I think you pick one of those. Levitate is not a great escape spell, because you cannot control yourself horizontally. So the only way that Levitate really works well as an escape spell is if you know that something very high above you is going to be that you can grab onto to push yourself in another direction. Otherwise, you're just going up. And going up is not like, maybe that's going to help you, but a lot of the times going up is just going to be like the monsters just looking at you until you decide to come down, you know? I see patterns. Thank you for the resub. When's more Elden Ring? Probably next week. I don't know which day or days next week, but next week we're going to do more Elden Ring. You want up? Well, if you want up, Levitate's a great spell. I love Levitate, but I wouldn't call it an escape spell. I think Levitate is a good tactical spell. You can really mess up a monster by casting Levitate on it if the monster is only a melee monster. And you can also cast Levitate on... My favorite thing to do with Levitate is to, like, cast it on the Ranger. And have them just, like, float above the battlefield, shooting down arrows at everybody. Okay, so you're escaping from a giant worm going out of a giant tunnel. Even then, man, I don't know if Levitate is going to be faster than just climbing. If you have a climb speed in any way at all, you are going to be about as fast as a Levitate. Because Levitate's only moving you like 20 feet up. So if you're able to climb, I think it's still faster to climb. Like I said, Levitate, I don't think Levitate's an escape spell in this circumstance, or most circumstances. How do I get my players to be more serious? Janice is asking, how do I get my players to be more serious? Janice, could you be a little bit more specific? Is it that your players are goofing off, like not taking your NPCs or the story seriously? Or is it that they're making goofy characters? Or that they're just, like, trying to be... I guess my question is, are they not taking you and are they not taking you seriously as a dungeon master that's trying to, like, facilitate the game? Or are they wanting to be goofy characters and tell a goofy story, and you're trying to make it a serious story? I think that's sort of a different situation. If your players are respectful of you, but they just really want to be goofy and run a goofy game, then a serious game might not be good for them. They just might not like it. Or you might need to address it more directly and be like, hey guys, I'm trying to run a serious campaign soon. Like, I wouldn't throw that upon players in the middle of a campaign. Like, if you got to sort of set the tone, you know, before you start, so they have a sense of what they're getting into. But if they're not taking the game seriously, like they're sort of just like not being particularly supportive of the fiction, or talking over you, or cracking jokes in ways that are annoying, they're trying to have sex with grandmas and kill children. All right, well, so yeah, so that sounds like they're just trying to do murder hobo shit. Have you tried speaking to them about it? That's the first thing you should do. Say, hey guys, that's not really what I want to do for D&D. I'm not trying to run a game that's Grand Theft Auto, the D&D game. I want to run a game that's sort of like a story. So in order for a game to be like a story, I need you guys to take seriously a little bit more of the characters and the world. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay. But then I don't really want... I don't want to run this type of D&D. And that's what you do. You just say it. You don't try to force them into something. You don't force yourself into something. You just tell them what you are trying to do. Tell them that you're not having fun with the version of it that it is. And if they are down to try something that is more akin to what you want, great. And if they're not, then you don't have to stress about it. Artist, thank you for the 45 biddies. Would you rather fight a red dragon as a level 5 rogue or a giant demon as an archer? I would rather fight a giant demon as an archer. Because you don't tell me what type of demon or what level archer. So I could fight a really big CR5 demon and be a level 20 fighter. Kick its butt. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, as they say. You could do Strahd as a Scooby-Doo adventure. I do like Strahd as a Scooby-Doo adventure. Hey, Cinder, for the Goofy Item Gone Serious stream, how complicated should these items be? Cross, you have seen me review Homebrew before. You know how I feel about overcomplicated anything. I think it should not be complicated if it doesn't have to be complicated. It should be like I said. If anybody wants to submit Homebrew for the special challenge tomorrow, tomorrow's challenge is silly magic items taken seriously. So if that sounds fun to you, you can submit Homebrew for that, and the submission form is in my Discord. It'll also be connected to the video stuff tomorrow. But that's the key, is it's not just silly items, it's silly items taken seriously. So if, for example, the joke of your item is that it's super long-winded, that's not good. That's not fun. I think that's a little bit whatever. You're still trying to make it good, you know what I mean? What is the meaning of life? I don't think it has meaning, man. I think the meaning is what you give it. I think life is just the thing that we do, and if we want it to have a lot of meaning, we can walk like it does, and then it does. It's pretty crazy. It's one of the only superpowers humans have. They decide something has meaning, it does. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that weird? Not a lot of creatures have that power. What's a magical breastplate that makes you think... a magical breastplate that makes you look bare-chested? I don't know if that's funny so much as cringy. But if that's the level of humor that you're going to be working with, I will be very comfortable completely tearing you to shreds when I review it live. That's fine. Would you fight a tier 2 demon as a level 2 tank or a level 4 assassin? Dude, Ricketic, you're asking the easiest questions. Obviously, I would fight a tier 2 demon as a level 2 tank. First of all, a level 4 assassin rogue sucks. Second of all, a tank is like a giant military vehicle. Even a level 1 tank is going to take out most demons, straight up. A level 2 tank, you're probably going to have some auxiliary guns on that, maybe a few gunners that work cannons on the side. You know what I mean? That's a whole friggin' crew you got going. And a tier 2 demon? What is that? What does that even mean? That's nothing, dog. A Garistra is a tier 2 demon. No, it's not. Not a Garistra. A Balgora. I could beat up a Balgora. If I had a tank? Tier 2 tank? Come on now. But yeah, if anyone wants to post questions, you're more than welcome to post them. The link is either in the video description if you're watching on YouTube, or you can do the command the command help on Discord. Cinder, do you think an ability to let a wizard drop concentration as an action to deal damage equal to the dropped spell in D6s is too much? I'm thinking about letting my wizard player be able to unlock that by finishing the formulas written in the margins of a spellbook he's going to buy. If you're doing it for your home game, then it's probably fine. probably fine. I think the question is going to be, where does that, what does that damage look like? Is it single target? Is it ranged? Is it touch? Is it area of effect? Is it force damage? Is it piercing? Like, those are the questions that are going to be the kind of thing that you're going to want to think about for your home game. But a bespoke power for a wizard, for them to be able to, like, sacrifice concentration to do a big explosion is friggin' cool. How to get into DMing? I think the easiest way to get into DMing is to figure out what resources you can get as cheap as possible. So grab, like, the basic D&D rules offline. Like they're just the basic rules. It's free. You can just get them off of any of the websites. You could even download some of the pre-made characters. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look for some one-shots or for some intro campaigns. You don't need to buy a module. You're going to look for some free stuff online. You can literally Google good one-shots for new Dungeon Masters. And you're going to try to run it. When I started being a Dungeon Master, the main thing that I would do is I would buy like $1 or $2 adventures, like little mini one-shots off of the DM's Guild. And I would run those and string them together to create the plot of the campaign. So I didn't actually have to plan any dungeons, or I did sometimes, but I had like a lot of like, we would have an adventure where the plot was sort of, oh, the players are doing this little thing, but instead of, you know, them going to the Tower of the Wizards for whatever the dungeon had in mind, I would just make it apply to the story. But it was really good for helping me learn like power balance. And then the other thing that is like, just, you know, talk to your friends. When you're running D&D as a new Dungeon Master, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and that's fine. And I actually think as a new Dungeon Master, it's almost better to run D&D for new players and for all of you to kind of just be on the same page and to be like, we're going to mess up. We're going to figure out the rules as we go. Less boogie. A longtime DM, and I was very intrigued to know what would think is a cool spell fusion combo. Enlarge, reduce, and immovable object. That could be a cool, fun spell combo. How about awaken and tree stride? You know, cast awaken on a tree and then just use it as a mobile teleporter. That could be pretty cool. What do you think about the D&D starter set? It's fine. I've run it. I've run like half of it before. I like the other one more. I like the Dragon Ice Peak one more. I have a wizard subclass that's called a what's that word? Syntixomancy. And it has a new spell list for fusion spells. So I'm curious what you think is cool. I think that the idea of fusion spells is really cool. You just got to be very thoughtful about how you're going to engage with that, because you could end up in a situation where you could like double up on concentration spells, which could stack in power pretty dramatically. So just keep your eyes out for that. Can a plasmoid druid enter somebody's mouth, then switch into a brachiosaurus and insta-kill any boss? I don't think so. I think realistically, if you were to leap into a creature's mouth and transform, the creature would spit you out. In fact, I'm 99% sure there is language for that type of thing in some circumstances, either of like you eating a creature when you're polymorphed or something like that. I don't think there's... I'm really anti those sort of like cheesy insta-kill stuff. Like, I also don't think you can cast create water into someone's lungs to drown them, but I see a lot of people trying to argue for that, but I just think that's silly. Full-time DM. Very cool. What does playing D&D feel like? I'm not a full-time DM. I don't know if you were saying you are. What is it? Are you suggesting that you've never been a player? It's fun to play D&D. What's up with D&D shorts? Why'd you say, oh, D&D shorts? What's up? Oh, hey, Gina. What's up? How to get motivation to start being a DM for the first time? I think a lot of that motivation is going to come from trying to get your friends excited to play. And maybe, you know, looking at some adventures that you might be interested in running. And when I say looking at adventures, I don't necessarily mean anything officially published. I mean, it could be anything from, like, something from fiction that you think would be fun to try to translate into D&D. Or genuinely go on the internet, just look up, like, go to the Unearthed Arcana subreddit, go to D&D Behind the Screen. Both of those are really good subreddits, and people will just post, like, dungeons they make and stuff like that. You can just pull them. This is subscriber only chat? Really? I did not do that intentionally. I can change that. Why is it subscriber only? Did I fuck something up? Oh, God. Can I change that in the middle of stream? Oh, it's gonna annoy the shit out of me if I can't. Fuck. Can I not change that, really? Oh my God, that's annoying the shit. I don't like that. That's so stupid. Oh, I can change it. 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 Okay, anybody can talk. I don't know. Yeah, sub to me if you want to, but I'm not trying to not let people talk. That's stupid. Sorry about that. My B, I apologize. Thank you for letting me know. No, man, listen, I'm not trying to force any engagement on anybody. You don't need to sub to me. I don't give a shit. It'd be nice if you do, but it's okay if you don't. How do you control your players who are wild cards and absolutely destroy your stories? You don't need to control them. You need to talk to them. And you need to try to, like, your players and you are on the same team, man. You know what I mean? If your players are actively destroying your story, one of two things is happening. They either don't realize that you don't like it, or they don't realize that that's not how they're supposed to play the game from your perspective. You know what I mean? That you need to express to them that they are doing something that you don't like. And that's making it harder for you to run the game that you are putting work into for them. All of those sorts of, like, how do I stop my players from, how do I get my players to, 99% of the answer, if the player is doing something you don't like, is you just need to talk to them. There are circumstances where there's, like, certain types of things to do a little bit more specific, but 99% of the time, the answer to that sort of question is talk to your players. Talk to them. Question for the silly magic item prompt for tomorrow. Do you want silly flavor for relatively normal mechanics or actually absurd mechanics? I want you to interpret the prompt however you want. And the prompt is that the magic items should be silly, but it should be mechanically sound, balanced, and evocative. It should function very well, doing what it's intended to do. And it should be very clear how it's written. That being said, what it's intended to do can be completely silly. Is the D&D starter set good for the first time playing D&D? It's not terrible. There's another one called, like, the Dragon of Ice something Peak that I think is actually a better opening adventure. It's less of a story, and it's more of like a series of stories, series of encounters almost that lead to, like, a big dragon fight. But I like it more. I think it's easier to run, and I think it leads a lot more space for you as a dungeon master to, like, build the character stories and put your own stuff in it. I like it a lot more. And it ends in a dragon fight. It's not Icewind Dale. Icewind Dale is like a horror campaign. It's like the something of Ice Peaks. Icespire Peaks is the Essentials kit. Yeah, the Essentials kit. Thank you, Flareware. The Essentials kit. Yes, it's the Essentials kit. Did you say the Essentials kit? Or did you say the Starter kit? There's two kits. There's the Starter kit and the Essentials kit. The Essentials kit is better. All right, let's start pulling up some of these questions, shall we? I'm curious to see what kind of things you guys have, unless there's any other pressing questions in the chat. Oof, look at that. Look at this. Look at this. Look at the graphic fidelity. Oh, so stupid. How do I stop my party from building a nuke? That's not a question. You don't have... How do you... There's no way a D&D party can build a nuke without a dungeon master doing a ridiculous amount of work to help them build that nuke. If they are building a nuke, you are being complicit. You can decide to stop being complicit. Or, get this, I know it's crazy, talk to them. Alright, let's see what we got here. Let's pull up a question. Okay. Boosh. Boosh, boosh, boosh. Dadoosh. Ba, 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 ba. Wait, bigger, please. Ba. 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 Alright, here's the question. Let's take a look at it. I recently made a mistake when using the frightened condition in a combat recently. I basically made it work like the stunned condition, as if they were frozen in fear. One of my players rolled really poorly twice for this effect, and ended up stun-locked for 2 rounds out of 4. Ooh, nobody likes that. That's no fun for anybody. It did not make the experience fun for them. Yep, that makes sense. Being stunned sucks. After the game, I realized my mistake and got back to them. I told them that I had messed up on the ruling and that, as recompense, they will be immune from the frightened condition for the next combat, a boss battle. Did I handle this well? Should I have offered that immunity? It's an interesting question. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what my first thought is. My first thought is, I don't know if you needed to offer immunity. I think acknowledging that you fucked up and clarifying the way that the rules are intended to work is probably all you really need to do. Maybe apologize for them having less fun, like own that you fucked up. But I don't think you need to make them immune for the next thing. I think if you do, it's fine. I don't think it takes anything away. But I think it's fine. I think the most important thing when you mess up is just acknowledging that you messed up. Do you know what I mean? It's just being like, hey guys, I'm sorry. I fucked up. I'll know better next time. Exactly, Brent. Exactly. How do I explain... Anyway, that was that question. It's a pretty straightforward question. Nothing too crazy there. I think the most important takeaway for that is just, like, it's okay to fuck up. If you're a new dungeon master, you're going to get rules wrong all the time. All the time. Ricky Tick says, no, they grab everything they can and build stuff. Yeah, but dude, did you decide electricity exists in your game? Did you decide that they can do welding? Do you have any idea how much actual time it takes for somebody to machine anything, let alone machine something complicated enough to build, like, fusion? That would take actual months of time for them to collect those resources and to build those things. Like in-game months of time. If you don't want your players to do that, you can just say, guys, this is going to be ridiculous. You don't have the time. This is not the way. I'm going to be honest, Ricky. I'm going to stop answering questions about that because I genuinely think you are just not acknowledging the fact that you are a dungeon master and that you can say, guys, this is not, we're not building a nuke. And that can be the end of the conversation. How do I explain to my players the rules of D&D? I think you sort of work with them as they play. Whenever I have new players join the game, I don't start with the rules. I usually start with the game. And we just kind of roll with it. I teach them as we play. It's like playing a sport, you know? You may explain the basics of basketball to somebody before you hand them a basketball. But when somebody's playing basketball for the first time, you want them to start dribbling and shooting the ball quickly. You want them to experience that feeling and to start going through the motions. So I feel the same way about D&D, where it's like, I mean, like when I run D&D for very new players, I don't have them make characters. I bring pre-made characters, and they pick one, and I sort of give them the vibes of the characters. This guy's really strong and does this thing called Rage, where he can get into like a super power mode. This guy is super creepy, and he casts magic and has a weird little imp familiar. This guy is really smart and has a book of spells. You know, this guy loves nature and can turn into animals. And then you just sort of explain the rules as they play. Lightning does not equal electricity in the context of actually making anything work mechanically. That's just you deciding it does that, which is fine. But if you are deciding it does that, then you are choosing to deal with that as an issue. But I am a new dungeon master, and this will be my first campaign. But that's what, so Gorm, that's kind of what I was saying initially, is that, like, it's okay for you to sit down with your players and be like, we're going to learn this game together. That's okay to do. You don't need to know the game super well to start. When I started running D&D, my only experience with it was 5 or 6 sessions playing, like, 4th edition, not even really 5th edition. And then I watched Critical Role a bunch. And that was it. I bought the books, and we kind of made it up from there. And as we played more, I got better, and I learned more. But, like, you got to kind of just start. It's okay. If you get every single rule wrong, if you genuinely get every single rule of the game wrong, your first campaign, but your players have fun, then you have succeeded. So you should not worry too much about learning every single thing all at once. Start small. It's okay if you don't know everything. It's also always okay for you to look something up. The first time that I was a dungeon master, the amount of times that I said, let me look something up, was a mountain. The other thing is that you have the internet. So you can look something up on your phone. So if you don't know how something works, you can always literally Google the question, what sort of roll does somebody make to climb something? How far can a character jump in D&D? When an attack roll matches a monster's AC, does it hit or miss? You can just Google all of those too. And your players, if you just remind them that you are new and you guys are all figuring out together, they're not going to be upset with you for needing to look up the rules. They're going to like it. They're going to be like, oh, cool, we're learning together, you know? Hey, Patrick, how's it going, buddy? How would you make Jack Black in D&D? Maybe College of Valor? College of Valor is like my least favorite bard, but I do think it is pretty fitting for Jack Black. I haven't looked at the new Warlock rules yet. Doesn't have no stat block for gods. That's funny. Pat, if you want to join me on the call, you're more than welcome to, but no pressure. College of Swords is fine too, but I think College of Valor is maybe better for Jack Black because it's a little bit more tanky than the College of Swords. But the College of Swords is so much better that you should definitely do the College of Swords. Let's see. Let's grab another question. Okay, somebody asked the question that I can answer very quickly, so I'm just going to answer it really quickly because it's silly. Great question, though. Somebody asked, why can I no longer find your past streams? You can find my past streams. They're all on my YouTube channel. Asked and answered. Boop. We got another question. What are your thoughts on Tales of Valiant? I haven't looked that much into it yet, but I love Kobold Press, so I'm very eager to see more about it. Yeah, questions are still accepted. You just post them in the form. Here's a question. Hello! I've recently revisited a homebrew monster I had started and peer-reviewed here a few months ago, the Perfect Learner. I was wondering if there was a website or something to help with all the D&D math and stuff. Yeah, dude, there is a great website. ttrpg. ttrpg, this website. Oh, you can't see it because I made the thing little here. I'll make it big. This website, ttrpg. Go here. ttrpg. This website. ttrpg. It does all the work for you. Look at this. You can just pick. It's gonna have a 21 in strength, an 8 in dex, 19 in con, and it just does all the math for you. My goodness, isn't that glorious? ttrpg. ttrpg. It's a great website, great resource. Support them on Patreon or Ko-fi if you can and feel inclined. Joop. Patrick, I think I see you messaging me. You're around? All right, I'll give you a call. Ring, ring. Hello, ahoy, ahoy, ahoy.
Hello.
There you go. How's it going, buddy?
Good, 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 good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Welcome to the show. How can I help you today?
Howdy, Chad. I'm actually Cinder. I am here under the auspices of attempting to alleviate your burden. I'm here to help you help the people.
You're one of those. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I'm just here to vibe with the people.
All right. Well, we're hanging. We are answering questions from chat and from a this form here. Let me actually send it to you.
Cool.
Uh-oh, I think we entered into Christmas music. Give me a second.
No.
Here's the form if you want to take a gander at it.
Yeah, I'll take a look.
All right, get the fuck out of here, Chris. Why do you always become Christmas music?
Everything eventually converges.
Fucking hate it.
On the Christmas music,
even
if there's no.
I like Christmas, and I love Christmas. I don't need Christmas, and I love Christmas. I actually really like Christmas music.
Yeah,
when it's time for Christmas music.
Emily and I were watching a movie last night. We were watching Wes Anderson's The Royal Tenenbaums, a movie that has nothing to do with Christmas, and as far as I'm aware, is set in the middle of fucking summer.
Yeah.
And halfway through the film, I'm like, that's the Charlie Brown Christmas theme. And lo and behold, it was the Charlie Brown Christmas theme. I don't know why they used that in the soundtrack, but the soundtrack devolved into Christmas music.
For sure.
It's the inevitable state of entropy.
Yeah. It is. Somebody's asking if my first D&D campaign is from the D&D starter set, then what books should I buy after that campaign? Gorm, I think that the question you need to ask yourself is what sort of resources do you want? Yeah. So if you want resources like options for new monsters and for new players, you're going to want to look at something like Mordekainen's Multiverse Tome, whatever that book is.
Yeah.
There's also books like Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything are both very good books for player options. You have to sort of decide if you're looking for monster books or player option books. The other thing that I want to say is that if you're really new to the game, you don't actually need anything that crazy for the game to be pretty exciting. Like,
not at all. The starter set gets you really far.
Yeah.
I think I honestly only own the player's handbook and then player-facing stuff. I don't think I own the monster manual, and I definitely don't own the DMG. Like, I just Google rules when I need them, you know?
I think I have a couple copies of it. I have a copy of the DMG somewhere, but I haven't looked at it in a long time.
It's not a bad thing to have. It's just it's far from being critical. You can't. It's not. You know, you're not going to not be able to play the games.
Yeah, especially for like just magic items is nice. You know?
Yeah.
Pat, we have a question that's a little bit of an emotional one.
All right.
How do I deal with the fear of making more complicated homebrew, i.e. subclasses?
Yeah.
How do we deal with the fear? Which is pretty prevalent because I think we scare people on this channel sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. Sometimes we do. Cinder, do you have thoughts? I'm curious, like where's your impulse initially?
I think that if I'm trying to be respectful and honest about like addressing fear and not just being like get good, get tough. I
Sure.
think the way that you start making something or trying to make something that you're a little bit scared to make in a very low stakes way.
Yeah.
That's the key. So I think
Yeah.
if you are nervous about making more complicated homebrew, then the only people you should try making it for at first is your players. And
That's very good.
if if your players like it, then that's cool, and you know that that's not a bad place to start. Also, if your players are confused by it, that's not embarrassing. That's just going to make your players be like, this confuses me, and then you can just explain it to them. It's very easy to, to talk to them about that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing that I would say is, if your goal is to like become somebody that's sharing it publicly and you're like trying to put yourself out there, you want to find like a more, not private, but less public forum style review position. So like, for example, in my Discord, there's a section called homebrew review or peer review where you guys can share your own homebrew and review it with each other. Or just, like if you have friends that play D&D, send it to them, ask them to look at it. But start small, man. You like, if you're nervous about making homebrew, the key is just making it not super, make the stakes low.
Yeah.
If the stakes are low, it doesn't matter.
I'll also throw out, and I'm not sure if your apprehension comes from a place of daunting, like this feels very big, or maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome, like I don't know if I'm good enough to tackle this yet. But if it's the latter, there's an interesting thing that is said a lot in writer circles, which is that the vast majority of people who want to be writers want to be novel writers. They want to craft a series. They dive straight, head first into, I've got, a 5-part epic planned. And genuinely good authors will always give you the same advice. Start with short stories, because you're not good enough to start with five books right away, right? And so if your impulse is to have already started small and you're practicing with things like monster stat blocks and items and whatever else that you think is kind of smaller than a subclass, that to me is a pretty good indication that you're actually a pretty good judge of the quality of your work and how to get good at something. So if it's a confidence issue, definitely take a little bit of heart in the fact that like you're getting practice every time you do something small so that you're going to be ready by the time that you're diving into something big. That's not a very intuitive way for most people to do things, and it's a really powerful way to learn.
Yeah. But yeah, don't be too scared, man. Just lower the bar. Lower the bar for fear, and then you're good. Kaboof.
Always.
What's up, Insomnia Knight? How's it going, buddy? What do you think about Daggerheart? I've only played it once, and I had a lot of fun. It feels very different than D&D.
Yeah, it's a very different game, which is fine. I think that's a good thing.
I'll tell you what, and I feel this way about all the games that are kind of like Blades in the Dark or Powered by the Apocalypse, where you sort of have like this narrative die that sort of determines there's narrative expression within that die.
Sure.
Maybe it's because I have never played a super long campaign in any of those systems, but I do feel like they really do well with short campaigns. Like, they're systems that are so focused on the mechanics mixing with the story that it's very hard to avoid story, I find.
Sure.
And I think it lends itself to short campaigns really well. But I've never played in any of those in like a longer campaign.
A lot of what PBTA tries to get you to do when you're doing, quote, longer form campaigns, and I think this is most prevalent in like Apocalypse World and Monster of the Week, is be episodic about it. Have a narrative that begins, has a middle, and then ends, right? In Monster of the Week, this is literally codified as the monster, the titular monster of the week. In Apocalypse World, they tell you how to do it with fronts and clocks. And moving in that episodic way can help make things longer, because you're like, it's like Buffy, right? Like each episode can kind of stand alone. It's a shorter story, but you get an overarching arc as you kind of carve out those episodic narratives. It's very different from a D&D style progression, which is obviously a lot closer to what we, now might associate with like an RPG video game, where it's like, if I want to go grind out a couple levels just for the sake of gaining power, that's not at odds with the narrative that's being crafted, because that's the point of the game. So yeah, it's very, very different. But you can do it. I've done it a couple times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it could work. Listen, I'm open to it. I love those systems though. I really like playing Daggerheart was a blast. I felt like I was able to really it really felt like I was playing an imagination game more than I felt like I was playing like a tabletop game.
Like a numbers game. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Pat, this next question I think has actually a very easy answer, but I think it's a really cool, it's a weird.
Sure.
I like the question, and I kind of want to explore the concept a little bit, because I do think it's kind of interesting.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a little bit of a longer one, but here, I'm going to make it big. A PC in a game I am running is currently the only person in the world that knows how to cast Revivify and the related spells. The spell is also able to purify a body and mind of a warping curse that several NPCs have fallen victim to. Okay, now here's where it gets interesting. The player wants to have their character make magical contracts to prevent other people from using the spell to revive people, or teaching the spell to other people. So this character, who I guess I was assuming was a cleric,
might not be though.
They might not be, but they actively want to avoid giving other characters in the other things in the world access to Revivify, even though it sounds like Revivify is like the cure to also a very specific disease in this game world. Okay.
Okay.
So they have two questions. Is this evil enough of an act that it should alter their alignment? Now, they rarely use alignment, so they're not sure how to judge that. I think that the fact that you rarely use alignment is going to help us answer that question. And then the next question is, one of the people that they want to put under such a contract is another player character. Should they allow that? Let's talk about the alignment. First of all, I just want to say, part of why I want to answer this question, even though I do think it's a fairly straightforward answer, is that it's a cool, I love that idea of like,
it's an interesting idea for sure.
Your character is the only character that can cast Revivify. If you want a great way to make a character feel special in a campaign, holy shit, that's a great one. You are the only one that knows that spell. That's just cool. I feel like that's a thing you could use across the board. Like especially with weirder stuff. Like what if your Warlock Eldritch Blast, they're the only one that knows Eldritch Blast. You know, all those weird spells, like I just think that's a really easy way and a really cool way to make people feel special.
Yeah.
Pat, I don't use alignment in my games. Do you?
I don't. I don't think it adds anything.
I don't think it
to
does
the
either.
System,
outside of a couple like spell mechanics. So,
and even those spell mechanics, like I almost always just offer up the choice to the player. Yeah. Right? Like, how is your player acting either in this moment or generally that would manifest should this be radiant versus necrotic damage? Right?
Yeah. Okay, let's answer the easier question first. The easier question is the player question, right? The second part.
Yeah.
The answer to the second part of should one player be allowed to like force a contract on another player, I think that is entirely dependent on if the other player is comfortable with that and thinks that's a fun idea.
Well, you use the word force, and I think therein lies the thing. Should a player be able to force another player? No.
Yes, no. But a character
should, right.
A character, maybe. Then it depends on if the player is comfortable with it or not.
Yeah, it's just consent. And you just have a conversation like, this is what this is going to entail. These are the implications. This is how I think I might take the story forward. Just make sure all the consequences are clear and see if they're excited about playing that out narratively, right?
And I'll tell you what, if the world had a plague and there was a guy that knew a spell that could bring people back to life, and it was the only spell that could cure the plague, and they decided not to share that knowledge with other people, whether or not that changed their alignment to evil, a lot of people that are probably pretty damn good would be very upset with them, like in that world. Like that is, whether or not the player decides they're evil, I think that is a indicator that they're, what I was going to say is, I don't know if they need to change their alignment, but if they're a cleric and their god wouldn't be down for that, that's probably not great, right? Depending on where their magic comes from, that could be pretty fucking bad. If I was a cleric of in any way sort of good god, and I was not sharing good, I would stop being a cleric. I would lose my clericdom, probably. And if that's not the case, I think the world could react to that, right? Like, ask this. If your adventuring party learned about this horrible disease that was ravaging the land, and there was an evil, you described them, you said there was an evil baron, or just a baron, that was, that could cure people. Hello? Who's calling? Who's this?
Sorry, that was Emily from the side next to me.
That scared the shit out of me. If there was a baron that owned the cure to a disease and refused to share it, you could build a whole campaign around the party fucking that guy up to get the disease, to get the cure. So like, your player might not be evil, but they are basically doing what could totally legit be a BBEG move.
I think something that I would want to call attention to is, if alignment, I don't think is a useful mechanic, but if you're having interactions in the game where a player is playing against their chosen alignment in a way that makes it feel like there are going to be these sort of big consequences, right? Like the stuff Cinder's talking about, losing your cleric powers, pissing off a lot of people that you might otherwise be allied with, filling that very BBEG position. You definitely have to talk to them about what kind of story they're trying to tell and why they're trying to do what they're trying to do, right? Because if they're trying to be like impish, little greedy, I have this useful information and I know I can milk everybody for what they're worth, like, it's your job as the GM to figure out, like, what does that mean for the table and for the narrative at play, right? Because that is, this is in the same universe as a player being a murder hobo in a game where that's not what you all set out to do, right? Yeah. And that's a problem, potentially. That's a problematic behavior, potentially. And I appreciate everything that Cinder is saying. I do just want to caution, like, don't punish the player for making that decision without talking to them first, because you don't want to, for example, take away their cleric powers and make them not able to play the game because they made a decision that was quote unquote evil, right? For that kind of thing, you need to make sure that you're all on the same page. But yeah, it's an interesting question. I love the idea. Question. I love the idea of a player is the only one that has access to a spell. I think that's just like a really fun way. I'm also, I mean, it sounds like there's some homebrew involved, but like mechanically, like how are they giving this spell to other people? Because if it's cleric magic, like that's infamously like not transferable, right? Like you have to just become a cleric of that god. So that's an unrelated quixotic thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting question. Question. This is exactly why I use alignment in this scenario. I think that if I was going to use alignment in a game, the way that I would do it in a way that would feel comfortable would be that I would really need to talk to my players about it before, like, we started the campaign. And honestly, I probably would make it matter for some and not for others. I don't know if alignment needs to matter for a fighter. It maybe needs to matter for a paladin or a cleric or a druid or something. I think the question is, like, what is alignment actually achieving? Well, that's what I mean. Right? Like you'd have to sort of decide, like, is alignment going to dictate your magic? Is alignment going to dictate, like, what does it dictate, and what powers does it wield? And then then at that point, my question becomes: is alignment actually serving as a useful indicator if what it does is govern, in this instance, relationships with other people, with your deity, with your magic source, right? Like, if that's something that's better served by having a more nuanced understanding of character motivation, is alignment just a weird hand-wavy binary on top of that actually serves to obfuscate? Because, if it's not applying uniformly, chances are you probably actually just want to understand the complexities of an interaction, right? Yeah. And that's Cinder, that's how you and I run almost everything. So that's just kind of where I sit. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting, and consequences in a game can be tricky to manage, right? Like, you have to have an open dialogue with your players, because otherwise they're going to feel sandbagged, and
you're going to end up on a Reddit post. My GM took away my cleric powers. Am I the asshole?
You might be. You might be.
Maybe. Who's to say?
Yeah. Oh my god. I need you guys to stop fucking talking about, like, sigmas and shit in the chat, or I'm just going to start timing people out. I'm
God
so
almighty.
uninterested in that conversation, and I have banned people for less. I'm going to just start timing people out for being annoying. I just don't care. I just don't care about that at all. Don't waste the chat space with garbage brain talk. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Have I ever made a dungeon that's just one big mimic? No. Is it a good idea? If you think it sounds fun, then sure. I think the question that you have to think about whenever you have a gimmick for a dungeon or an idea is, how do you actually make it work as a dungeon? Like, what matters more than anything else is, does it actually have a series of encounters that, like, feel like they, like, explore a bunch of varieties of play and sort of tell a little story? Like, what are they going to be doing? Is it just mean, like, they go into one room and then they punch the walls, and they go into another room and they punch the walls? Like, you're going to need that dungeon to have diversity within it. Do you know what I mean?
And I think the internals of a mimic could potentially be that, because the mimic is consistently trying to protect its vulnerabilities and funnel them into traps. I think you could do it, but I don't think there's anything intrinsic about it being. I don't
think there's enough of a plan in a dungeon that's a mimic for it to work. I think you need a little bit more meat. You need the plan.
Bones. Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
All right, here's another question.
Yeah.
Let's make it big. I'll block my face so everyone can read it. Hello, I'm a player in a group of 6 players and a DM. I am a Warforged wizard. Yeah, 6 players is like my upper end. A Warforged wizard, necromancer, and we are level 6.
Cool.
When necromancers get really strong. I would argue necromancers are never really strong, but I accept. I am doing a fair amount more damage than most other players. I legitimately don't know how. But I don't want to overshadow them in combat, them being the other players. Do you have any tips on how I can go about not stealing the spotlight while still playing my character to the fullest? I like this question a lot. I think it speaks to a level of, like, wanting to be a good teammate and maybe not having the tools to do that, but knowing that that's a thing you want to do, which I fucking love. Great question.
I have a surface level, like an immediate sort of quote red flag that flies for me on this question, which is, if you are a player and you find that you are radically outperforming everyone else at your table, almost regardless of class and subclass, chances are someone's misinterpreting a rule. You're being given too much, or the other players are being hemmed in by either a little quirky homebrew rule that your GM has, or
I'm wondering if this person has, like, just an army of skeletons and they're not following the rules of how many undead you can have, or they're, like, giving their skeletons magic items or stuff like that.
There's literally no way that we could know that given what's on in the question, but I think that would be my first thought, is that, like,
because a level 6 wizard can have 1 skeleton at a time, maybe 2, maybe.
And, like, summons are powerful, don't get me wrong.
They're not that powerful.
But the rest of your party should not feel like you are sucking all of the oxygen out of the room from the rest of your party just for using your class abilities.
And, I mean, like, also, genuinely, Necromancer's, like, the weakest damage output. Not the weakest, but they're not strong.
Especially Necromancers, right? But in general, Wizards can get good, right?
There might be some rules. There might be... So let's assume that there is not a rules misinterpretation happening here.
Yes.
And
maybe there's a good question regardless.
Maybe they're skeletons of magic items. Maybe they are just casting fireball every round, and it just happens that they're a necromancer.
Sure.
This is what I think, and I think it's something that is really easy for spellcasters.
Yeah.
You don't need to do damage to feel awesome. One of the best ways to feel awesome is to cast haste on the barbarian. Cast polymorph when the rogue has 1 hit point left. Cast polymorph on him and turn him into a giant ape. Casting walls, blinding creatures. Like you can be spending a lot of your power and energy, even your summons. Check this shit out. You want to have a big impact on the battle, but let everyone else take the spotlight. Have your skeletons grapple people.
Yeah, that shit's really good. That's really good.
So I think the thing that you got to think about is, first of all, making sure you're following the rules.
Yeah.
Because really you shouldn't be outpacing everybody on damage that extremely at level 6. But beyond that, use your resources for teamwork.
Yeah. And I'd go so far as to say, unless you're playing explicitly a game where all of you came together and said, we want combat to be overwhelmingly the focus, right? We want to kill stuff. That's what we're here for. Which if you did, it's fine, and ignore this next piece of advice. But if you didn't, and that's just sort of how the game has been evolving because D&D tends in that direction, maybe have a conversation with your GM around providing other things to be doing during combat, right? Because like everything that Cinder said is 100% applicable, but there's also stuff like a rogue is at their best when they can lockpick something mission critical in the minute of a fight. They're not just sneak attack, right? Your ranger with sharpshooter should be able to like pick off a button from across the room that will cause some environmental something to happen. You or any of the other intelligence-oriented characters should be able to interrogate someone that you managed to get away, a little ways away from the fight. There's other stuff that could be happening where damage throughput stops being the only thing that takes up time and attention. And it sounds like there's maybe a dearth of that at your table. And if that's unintentional, it might be worth talking about as well.
Yeah. But listen, that's a good problem to have, is like, how do I be a better ally to the party members?
It's a great question, and like kudos to you for like asking that question. That shows a level of attentiveness to the other people at the table and just like emotional maturity in play that is really hard to find, even amongst people who do this shit professionally and semi-professionally. It's a really respectable question.
Yeah. Does Spare the Dying work only if the target took exactly damage to get them to 0? Or the damage can get them below 0? No, damage going negative doesn't really matter unless it goes negative up to the maximum of their HP. So if your character has 15 hit points, if they go to -7, that's just 0. But if a single hit takes them to -15, then they just die.
There's also I think it's worth mentioning the specifics of this rule because it works a little differently in 5e than it does in other versions of D&D. There is no such thing as negative hit points in D&D 5e. The thing that Cinder's referencing here is if a hit, one hit, not a turn, one hit, does twice your maximum hit points in damage, which if you're at 0 is just your maximum hit points in damage, you instantly die. But that doesn't accrue, right? So it's not like every turn, if they do -3 and now you're at -7, you don't track negative hit points. So once you're at 0, you're just at 0. That's it. And so it doesn't matter for the Spare the Dying thing because they just fall to 0. There are no negative hit points.
Exactly. Can I ask a question about what sort of NPCs I can add to my character's backstory? That's a question for your Dungeon Master. And that's a great question for your Dungeon Master. That's a question your Dungeon Master is going to love. Your Dungeon Master is going to be like, yeah, you can have, like you should, if you work, the best secret strat to have a cool backstory that your Dungeon Master is going to really give a shit about is to build it with them. Because if you put an NPC in your past and you just come up with them on your own, that's kind of cool. But if you have your Dungeon Master help you build an NPC, they can tie that NPC to things in the world so that it ends up becoming more relevant, Like maybe they're going to decide, I'll give you a fucking example from our podcast. In our podcast, one of the main characters, she worked with Pat to like build her parents' backstories, and because of that, her parents had like pretty important political positions to a certain extent that like have major impacts on our campaign. That would not have happened if they didn't say, if she didn't say, hey, let's, we're gonna work on this together.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Pat, how do you feel? How to feel like you are sufficiently prepared to run a session? How to feel?
Do not, cannot, will not. God, oh Lord, listen. The short answer is you will never feel sufficiently prepared to GM a session because there's always going to be something that you don't see coming, and that's the beauty of the space, right? Like, that's the beauty of the thing, is that you can't predict every possible outcome.
Mm-hmm.
It helps to exercise the part of your brain that's good at improv. It helps to learn the rules of the system, and then also to trust your first instincts within the rules of the system. But Cinder can tell you, we've been recording a shit ton of Rally over the summer, because we're getting close to the end and we need to get it done by a certain date. And I have had like 3 mental breakdowns going into every recording session.
But that's different. We're making a show and we're in like the final episodes. It's like it's a
lot. It's a lot.
That's
but it is. But you should not be having mental breakdowns. But my point is, there's no amount of preparedness that makes the feeling of uncertainty go away, because that uncertainty is a key ingredient to making a TTRPG session work and be valuable. So you gotta learn to embrace that a little bit. Learn that you're gonna be okay, even if there's something you don't know. And in fact, you're gonna be better off for it if there's something you don't know.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that for me, I plan until I'm not having fun planning anymore.
Also valid.
And also, I do think that it's easier the more you do it. Like, I think you need more planning to get a campaign going, to like get people going in a good direction. But once you get a sense of the way your players play, it's easier to sort of realize what you need to lean into and what you need to avoid. Yeah, man, we do have a podcast. It's called Unbalanced Encounters. It's on Spotify. Here's our website. Ooh, so nice. Yeah, we've been doing this podcast for like 2 years.
2 years.
It's an actual play podcast where we take like 4-hour sessions, and they are edited and like highly soundscaped, and we have original music and stuff, original theme songs and sound effects and shit. And they're edited down to like an hour and a half, 2-hour episodes, and it's pretty good. People like it for the most part. Sometimes they hate it. No, usually they like it. But yeah, Unbalanced Encounters. Check it out. Wherever podcasts are podcasting, you can find it.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that you don't ever really feel sufficiently prepared until you're just comfortable hanging with your friends, fucking around.
And that's kind of the other thing, is like, you know, you think about it like a band, right? When do you know that you are sufficiently prepared to like hang out and jam with your friends? It's when you're comfortable hanging out and jamming with your friends. It's not when you have all the licks down, right? Like, it's gonna be fine.
Yeah, it's on YouTube as well, the show. If you look up Unbalanced Encounters, we have a YouTube channel. Next question is a lightning round question. You ready for this?
Yeah, let's go.
Does Swarm Keeper's insects push work on opportunity attacks? No.
What does that mean?
Forced movement does not create opportunity attacks. So whenever you force a creature to move against their will, it does not trigger an opportunity attack.
I think they're asking, can you use that feature on an opportunity attack? Because if they're not, you're right.
No, but they're not asking that. They're asking if does the Swarm Keeper's insect push work on opportunity attacks?
Well, again, work on is vague, because the two interpretations are, does it trigger an opportunity attack?
Well, the answer is no either way, because it only activates on your turn, and opportunity attacks don't happen on your turn. So either it doesn't work because it's not on your turn, or it doesn't work because forced movement doesn't trigger opportunity attacks.
Yep.
Lightning.
Just wanted to make sure we got both interpretations of that.
Lightning. Dude, people hate when I mispronounce their names, but like, chill out.
What are you gonna do? Like, y'all are just out here face rolling your keyboards. Like, what are you gonna do?
This is another sort of broad one.
Sure.
And you're gonna hate the answer, but it's the only answer that I have.
Yeah.
This is the question is: I've been making a ton of homebrew magic items for our campaign. Any tips on how to gauge magic items power? Literally the same way you gauge the power of anything. So if you want to figure out how powerful magic items are, you need to compare them to two things. One, if you're looking for a basic level of power to balance against, you look at the officially published magic items. Notice, for example, an uncommon weapon might be a +1 weapon with nothing else. A magical weapon that has something else but no +1 might also be uncommon. A magical weapon that has +1 and something else usually is rare. However, a +1 piece of armor that has nothing else is also usually rare. So like there's weird stuff like that, but you just got to like sort of pull with the punches. But if it's just for your campaign, if your goal isn't to like put it out into the world, then you don't actually need to balance it against anything other than what's in your campaign. So you decide how powerful a +1 weapon is in your campaign by determining how many +1 weapons a player might come across. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Why do you think I would hate that answer? That's a very good answer.
Because the answer was talk about it, and you hate talking about it.
Do I?
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm just kidding.
That's always the right answer.
Fine. All right. Somebody asked the question that we're not going to spend a lot of time on because I don't have a good answer. How can I learn to effectively play using miniatures and battle maps? I think it's the same way that you do anything else, man. You just start doing it.
Yeah, I also don't know that. I mean, we won't spend a lot of time on this because I agree. But like, what does that mean? Like, as opposed to theater of the mind, because you could use like a VTT, and that's cheaper, and you can practice on a VTT.
I don't think that's true, but I don't think they were talking about it from a financial perspective. I think they're just talking about how to do them.
Which is like just practice.
When I use battle maps in person, they are almost theater of the mind. I really don't use any aesthetics at all. I just use it for measuring distance and spaces. When I use battle maps online, I try to find really evocative, colorful maps that like other people made, because I feel like when you're playing online, you need more toys on the screen to like make it more fun, to help balance out the not being able to be in the same room with people.
I don't know that I necessarily agree with that conclusion, but I always do try to find a good map, so maybe I do agree with that conclusion.
I think a good map is a powerful tool. It's not what you need, but it can really help players maintain focus
to make a big difference
when you're not in person. Yeah.
I think that's right.
Crosstalks, I think, says it in a really lovely way. They say, instead of asking how strong is this, ask how strong do I want this to be, and then find an item of strength that you want to gauge it with, and that items of similar strength. I think that's a great way to think about it. Yeah. So there's nothing to it, but just to do it. Well, yeah, kind of. Quarter. I mean, what do you mean? Like, I guess you could look up tutorials. I mean, part of it is going to be finding a virtual tabletop that you like. But yeah, it's the same thing as being a dungeon master. Like, if you want to look up videos online and stuff, you can. But in terms of like making your battle maps cool, it's sort of a question of how much DIY time do you want to put in to like build stuff if you're playing in person, versus how comfortable do you want to get with learning the nature of different tabletops that exist and like seeing if one fits the vibe that you want to do. But yeah, like, you know, there's a lot of virtual tabletops. So some of them cost money, some of them are free. And you can really lean into them, or you can use them in super bare bones ways. There's not like a right or wrong way to do it. I think if your goal is to get familiar with them, though, that only thing to do to get familiar with them is to just start messing around with them.
Yeah, and I think therein lies the sort of nuance of the question. It's like, if there's a more specific thing that you would like to know, there might be a different answer, right? If you're like, hey, how do I get started designing maps for tabletop, battle map play? That's a very different question. How do I literally put the pieces on the board? Like, there's a whole section of the DMG for that, right? And you can go read that section, and it'll take you about 3 minutes.
If we're thinking about it from like a way to if the question is how do I run battle map combat more, I think you as a dungeon master have to think more tactically and encourage your players to think more tactically. Because when you're using a battle map, you can be like, if you want to cast Counterspell on that spell, you need to be 15 feet closer because you are not 60 feet away. You can create complicated things. Like, if you're using a battle map, you can pretty easily have a battle that takes place on a series of platforms that every other turn flip over. That's really hard to do. That's really, really hard to do in Theater of the Mind. But you can actually just look. You can be like, okay, I'm on tile A. The A tiles flip over every other round, so I have to get off this tile before this round is over. So you can build in layers of, like, the environment playing a much larger role in the combat. Also, in terms of, like, both distance and difficult terrain and like verticality and stuff, just because as soon as you're using a map, a good way to think about using a map, I think, if you're struggling with how to incorporate it in a way that's going to be positive, is the map is going to be remembering stuff for you.
Right.
So you have space to not remember. You don't have to remember where everything is. So you can put stuff there that might be a little bit beyond your normal desire to remember stuff.
And also it'll communicate it out for you. So it's not just you remembering, it's also your players remembering, which helps. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that tile flipping thing is something that, like, I would not have thought of if you had asked me to design a map right now. And that's just like, you just got to do it, right? And eventually you'll come up with these ideas just by means of play. So you'll start somewhere and you'll work on it.
And you don't need, and if you're using virtual stuff, honestly, you don't need minis anyway, man. For the longest time, I used a whiteboard that had a grid on it that I just bought. That was like $6. And I just drew things on pieces of paper and put them on the map. And honestly, that worked really well because I could draw crazy monsters and then they could take up weird shapes because I could just cut out the shape that I want them to be. And that's how much space they take up on the map.
There are a couple of papercraft sites as well that allow you to like print out figures that you effectively just fold up. They're your minis. So lots of options.
Yeah. Griffin, thank you for the resub. 6 months. Crazy.
Yo,
you're,
hell
listen,
yeah.
You got it. We got our belly is showing. We got 3 months till it's time to pop one out. That's good,
the metaphor we're going with.
Yeah, man.
I accept.
You want a different metaphor?
Do you have another 9-month metaphor? Because that'd be pretty impressive.
No, and no one ever will.
No.
Okay. Here's a question about world building. Unless Chat wants to ask something before we hop into the next one, which I like waiting for. What's up, Yazikon? How's it going, buddy? Janice says, should I use D&D Beyond stuff like the Dark Tides of Bilgewater? I have no idea what that is. I would say if you want to, yes. Is that a campaign module? Is that a third-party product?
I think it's a campaign module.
I don't run modules that often. That's not because I think they're bad. It's because it's not how my brain works as a dungeon master. So I have little experience with most of the larger modules. I have a lot more experience with the more like episodic books, like Tales from the Yawning Portal, where there's like little mini adventures, because I've plugged a lot of those into larger campaigns. But I think that if you want to buy and try a module, you just, you know, look up, read some reviews on it, check it out. Make sure the vibe is one that you are excited for. It has subclasses and monsters and stuff. I mean, like I said, dude, if it's a book you're excited by, if the things that are in it look cool, then grab it. I will say though that it's not a book that I've heard of before, so I don't know how many subclasses and monsters it's gonna have compared to the bigger subclass and monster books, which are like the Mordekainen's Tome of Everything books and the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything books. Like if you're really gunning for, I want monsters and I want player options, I would say a module and a setting book is going to have some, but they're not going to have as many as like the larger compendium books.
Yeah, it is a campaign book. It's
if it's free, then who cares? Then yeah, man, fucking use it. I have no idea what it is.
I'm looking this up now. I think it might be new. I'm not 100% sure about that, but there are some things in here that I haven't heard of. Renegade Fighter, Path of the Depths Barbarian, and the Wild Card Rogue.
Oh, it's probably third. It's a third-party product, I bet.
Third party?
Who's it by?
Yeah.
Who's it by?
Runeterra?
Yeah, it's about third. So it's a third-party product. So that's basically another company that's not Wizards of the Coast that's partnering with Wizards of the Coast and putting stuff on their site. So I can't speak for it, but it's probably cool. I do know that in order for a company to partner with Wizards of the Coast with Wizards, in order for folks to get stuff as third-party stuff on D&D Beyond, it does generally need to go through Wizards of the Coast editorial teams. So there probably is an element of this is balanced that you can somewhat trust, but that is also not always the case because some of those things are very setting dependent. So for example, like if you look at like the Humblewood the Humblewood stuff. The Humblewood
Yeah, which I
stuff
really wanna play
is
so
really
bad.
cool, but it's much better balanced for a Humblewood campaign than it is a non-Humblewood
Right.
campaign.
Not to say you can't use it. It's just be aware that, you know, we had a question earlier about somebody saying, like,
Shade
you know,
says it's a
why
little
am I out
jank.
doing? Yeah. And, you know, somebody was saying, like, why am I doing so much more damage than my other players? This wasn't the answer to their question because they're playing an SRD class. But that could be an answer. Is like, oh, I'm playing a homebrew thing. Well, there it is, right? Like somebody miscalculated when they were doing the homebrew. So treat third-party stuff like homebrew, even if you could treat it like trusted homebrew. Treat it like homebrew.
Yeah. JR, you can ask a question in the chat. If you want to donate, you can, but there's no pressure to. Or if you want to ask a question anonymously or submit a question, there's a submission link in the video description. So if you want to ask a question in the chat, you can. If you want to ask it in the post, you can ask it there. Also, can we submit subclasses for the reflavoring challenge in normal review streams? If you want to, I'm going to tell you, Meta Boy, you're not going to be, probably not going to be super, I'm not going to like spend a lot of time on it. Like, I'll probably read it for like 5 seconds and then try to guess what it is and then say, cool. So if you're down for it to be that, then yes. But it won't be, I won't have more to say.
A lot of work for a quick bit. Yeah.
I mean, if that's going to satisfy you, then I'm fine with it. But I just don't want you to be upset if you post it and then I'm like, I spent 3 seconds talking about it. I was trying to create a religious order in my D&D game with one of my characters and a cult with the other and have them duke it out in a holy war. Any suggestions for making them and starting the conflict? I'm going to give you a weird suggestion here. And it's going to sort of be antithetical to what you are asking. I think if you want to have one of your players part of a religious order and one of your players part of a cult and have those two things at war, the challenge that you have to do is how can you run a D&D game where these two players are playing on the same side while that is happening?
Which
that's
I think the
real question for me.
I think there are lots of answers to that question, right? Like, you have to answer it for your home game, but like the entire early premise of Baldur's Gate is basically that. You've got Lae'zel versus kind of everyone else.
I guess that's
because
true.
they're pitted against a common enemy.
Yeah.
And the factions flare up, but they're still sort of singularly focused on that common enemy. You got to have it straight, right? Because if you make the conflict between the cult and the religious order the central conflict of your game, and then pit these two players against each other, the party is going to dissolve immediately.
Yeah.
And you don't want that. That's not fun for anyone at the table. So you need to either choose to make it a secondary conflict or reconsider having players be implicated in the conflict.
Or, yeah, you do Romeo and Juliet. Maybe not that they're in love, but that they are parts of these larger conflicts that they don't really personally necessarily have a connection to or agree with. You know, they're star-crossed adventurers. They're supposed to hate each other, but they find a kinship and a friendship that their families and different sides both hate, but they use it to find, you know, the true meaning or whatever.
If you want, and I don't know if you're just starting out, but if you want to make that happen right away, as you're introducing the characters, instead of starting everybody off in a tavern, have one of these two players immediately in a fight, right? That they're already on the back foot for, and have the other player come in and be able to help them out of that jam.
Yeah.
And you will immediately give them a narrative reason.
All that being said, Shades the Mothman. Excuse me, I'm getting better at saying your name. I apologize. Shades of the Mothman kind of just wants them to be in love, and I think that's great too.
That's fine. That's beautiful.
Gotta love some love.
We're
JR, thank you for the 5. JR asks a very mechanical question. Can a College of Lore Bards cutting words affect a enemy's initiative? I don't actually know. Let's look.
Whoa.
Let's do a little bit of research. I'm gonna be honest. I haven't looked at
I'm gonna go with no because I think it's a reaction.
Well, let's see what it's a reaction to.
Yeah.
Let's see. When a creature that you can see within 60 feet of you makes an attack roll, ability check, or damage roll, you can use your reaction.
College of Lore Bards cutting words affect an enemy's initiative?
Yep, we're about to answer that. Thank you for being so late, TTS. You can use your reaction to expend inspiration. I think yes. I think
So
yes.
here's my question.
The
and
question
I
is initiative an ability check? And I think that
Well,
most
no,
people say that it is.
the answer is yes. That's not arguable. Jeremy Crawford has chimed in. It is very clearly an ability check. It's a non-proficient dexterity ability check. My question is, do you have a reaction available while you're rolling initiative?
I think so, because the abilities that you have access to in the game that require actions or bonus actions, you still have access to when you're not in combat. And I don't think the act of rolling initiative is like an empty space. Like, it takes precedent over people doing things.
But it is just an ability check that happens.
Yeah, and reactions particularly are the one thing that they break that mold. They happen when the trigger happens, and the trigger is an ability check.
Yeah.
So I think it would work.
Yeah.
I think it would work.
I think I think it would work. And then I think it's very interesting to think about not having your reaction available before you've taken a turn. But that's fine. It's just interesting.
Yeah. You lose counterspell that round, which might be a big deal.
Maybe, yeah. But that's a fun use of action economy. And I would argue that yes, you should probably be able to do that.
Yeah. Good question.
I think you should also be able to use Bardic on initiative rolls. Though I don't know whether or not...
I think you can if you already have one. I think you have to preemptively... You can't reaction give someone a Bardic Inspiration.
Correct, because there is no...
That would be a... I wonder if there's a subclass that does that. That would not be a bad subclass feature.
Yeah, to be able to give Bardic on initiative, or like roll a Bardic, everyone within 30 feet of you that you choose gets to add that number to their initiative roll. That would be really good.
Yeah. Very nice, thank you. Very nice, you're welcome. Thank you. Dude, you gave me $5. Thank you. You didn't need to do that.
Yeah, hell yeah. What a good, quirky little question. I love action economy questions. They're so niche.
You know what? In a world of, like, uncertainty and interpretation and nonsense bananas, it is sometimes nice to have a question that just has an answer.
Yep. Agreed.
Speaking of questions that are a little bit more open-ended, well, let's see if Chad has asked anything really quickly. Chad has like 18 seconds to post a question before we're going to move on. We'll give them a second. We'll be gentle. We'll be kind.
We'll be kind in this moment.
Yeah. Dude, I have a recording session tonight for Castleton.
Oh, damn, dude. That's a late night.
Yeah, I know.
Jesus.
That's what you get when you work with Australians.
You're going to have to tell me how that's going, not on stream.
Yeah. I'll tell you about it.
I want all the Bridgerton goss.
Yeah. I have never hugged anyone in my life. I will never hug anyone in my life. Humans are gross. You're covered with all sorts of foul sickness and creatures, and I would never befoul my ancient eldritch body with any sort of physical contact with any of you. But I do hope that you guys share hugs with each other, because I have learned that is something that is very healthy for the human psyche. So hopefully you guys like to hug, but no, I will never hug a human. It's gross. I do not do gross things. This next question is, how do you integrate backstories and personal quests into the main plot? Reverence is asking. Let's give the. We'll come back to the. I'm gonna give Reverence a second. With the new paladin, can smite be cast 3 times in it? Okay, I don't know, man. New paladin, no. With the new paladin, smite can be cast once. It's a spell. That's as far as I know it. So I think you can cast smite less now, not more.
Yeah, I think that's right.
All right. Okay, question. How do you integrate backstories and personal quests into the main plot without derailing them?
Well. Backstories and side quests.
I'm timing that guy out for 10 minutes. I don't want people being creepy in my chat. All right, what were you saying? Sorry.
Fair enough. So the question is, how do you get backstory and side quests into the main quest?
Yeah.
Without derailing the main quest.
So we're asking this question. So here's what I'm going to say, Pat. We're not going to say you have to do it from the start. We're assuming that you don't have that option here.
Yes. I was going to say that I will toss out that obviously side quests you just can't because they're emergent, but like backstory, do what you can to have it in from the beginning, right? Like I accept that is not the question we're answering, but I will just say do what you can to have it in from the beginning. It's a lot easier. If you can't, it's such a. I mean, it's a good question, and I think it kind of comes back to the story thing we were talking about earlier, Cinder.
Yeah, I mean, I have an answer. I think I know the answer to this. And it's completely related. The way you tie in somebody's personal quest into the main plot is that person makes a personal quest that is related to what has happened and is happening in game.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. And if the person, that being said, let's take it a level further. Let's say the person has a personal quest that is not tied to, so let's say, for example, you're playing a campaign where you're fighting a bunch of undead shit. It's an evil lich campaign. If you want to have a personal quest, it's really going to be easy to tie that personal quest in if you tie that to the undead. Maybe your family was killed by a vampire and that vampire worked for the lich or whatever. But let's say your personal quest is your family was killed by a dragon and you're going to go dragon hunting. I think that there's two things to do. One is that it is kind of... One, you as the Dungeon Master have to kind of okay any personal quest, so I don't think anyone should have a personal quest that you are like, I have no idea what the fuck to do with that, or that doesn't fit for the game. So let's say you okayed the personal quest of somebody having a dragon that they want to get revenge on, and you just don't know how to integrate that into the game yet. I think there's two things to do. One is that it's not all your responsibility. And part of that means, I'll give you an example, and this is an example that I wish I remembered which YouTuber I'm taking this from, because I did not make this up. But here's the example. Let's say your player is on a quest to kill a dragon. Your player walks into a bar. They have two things they could do. One, they roll a perception check. You as the Dungeon Master say, you don't really see much. They say, okay. And then they feel like their backstory isn't being tied into the plot. Here's another way they could do it. Your player walks into a bar. They say, I'm looking for anyone from the dragon hunting guild because I want to know if there's been a dragon through here. Can I make a perception check? Now, not only does the Dungeon Master know what's happening, all the other players know what's happening, and you're bringing that dragon hunting into everyone's minds. So you're sort of indicating to everyone at the table that that's important to you. That's important. Your players should be doing that. As a Dungeon Master, you can always take a MacGuffin and lock it behind a side quest. So let's say the quest is kill the lich. Well, maybe the players discover that this lich is weird. Their phylactery is kind of working differently, and it sort of exists in the astral plane. So they need to figure out how to get like a spelljammer ship to go kill the phylactery. Well, guess what? Where is the spelljammer ship? In the horde of that dragon. You know, like you gotta, like you can take the side quest and plug it into the main quest as like a resource that helps along the main quest. So there's a story reason to do it also. Yeah, that's where my head goes anyway. Uh-oh. Patrick, I lost you. You muted.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome back.
Discord screwed up. Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I think that's right. I think that that what you're effectively asking is how do you build subplot into plot? And the short answer is figure out how they are integrally connected. That, fortunately for you, doesn't need to be obvious immediately. Mm-hmm. You can kind of work toward it as you go. Mm-hmm. But I think that, like, if you have a quote-unquote main plot in a D&D game, which, let's be honest, D&D isn't built to have, if you have a main plot in a D&D game and you want to, quote, stay on track, you have to kind of do the work to figure out how everything is integrated into that main plot.
Yeah. It's a good question. I think that it's one of those things where it is sort of like the snake eating its own tail, where the real answer is you tie in a backstory by making sure the backstory can be tied in. but that's hard to do retroactively. I mean, the other option that you can always do is if you're really struggling, you can just talk to your player about it. And you can be like, hey, man, can we change this? Because I can't figure out how to tie this into the game. Like, initially it made so much sense that you were raised by a washing machine. But this has turned into like a medieval, Roman emperor style political campaign that doesn't have science fiction technology, and I feel like I don't know how we're going to tie a washing machine into it. So let's find something that can motivate you in this world.
I also think that setting like genre expectation and how seriously you're going to take the set dressing of the campaign up front in your session 0 is helpful here, because
yeah.
like to Cinder's point, like that's a crazy divergence from your session 0. It's not impossible, but like you probably shouldn't be varying that much. So if you decide that you want to play a quirky, eclectic game where one of your players was raised by washing machines, that doesn't necessarily need to be a whole big thing, but it should fit, right?
Yeah,
it should
yeah.
be part of the expectation space of the game going in. And I'm sorry, I managed to circle back around to figure it out before you start playing, but it really makes a lot of stuff way easier.
yeah, it does. It really does. It really does. All right. This is a question that I think a lot of people probably have that are newer dungeon masters, and I actually think it's a question that you don't need to worry about as much as you think, and that's kind of just what I want to tell you. As a new DM, how could I make sure that my players have a fun/balanced encounter, while some of them are multi-classing? One of my players is a Sorlock, which I've heard can be powerful. Should I give magic items to those who I feel like are falling behind in combat? What are some ways to make sure all my players are at equal footing? Genuinely, all that matters is how they feel.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't need to worry about this until it becomes an issue. And if it becomes an issue, you ask your players how they feel. And then based on what they say, you can make adjustments. That's
also,
really
ask your players what they want as a consequence.
Yeah.
I can't tell you the number of times that I've played with somebody who's like, I really want to play a monk. I really want to play a monk. I really want to play a monk. And then they get a couple, 2 levels into the game and they're like, I'm not feeling like I can show up in combat the way that I want. I feel like I'm key choked. And it's like, okay, that's a very common complaint. How do you want to solve it? And sometimes they'll say a magic item. 90% of the time they say, I just want more key, which is the easiest thing in the world to give them.
Yeah.
And occasionally we get players like Sam in Unbalanced Encounters who is fucking fine in the way that they play the monk, and it just doesn't become an issue at all. Yeah. So there's no universal. Just ask.
Yeah. The other thing that I was going to say is that, and this is specifically, I know this isn't really your question, but I think it's almost more important than your question. As a new dungeon master, you need to make sure your player understands what it actually mechanically means to multi-class sorcerer and warlock, because it is powerful, but it's also extremely limited.
Yeah.
And if you don't use those, I'll give you a simple example. Like they learn spells slower, just straight up.
Quite a lot.
They don't get spells to as high a level as full casters. So they I was running a game for a paladin sorcerer, and he got really upset because he was like, I should get 3rd level spells, and I'm like, no. You get 3rd level spell slots. But if we look at how the multi-classing table works, you don't have access to 3rd level spells. You just have 3rd level spell slots. And he was frustrated with that. It's like, yeah, but that's the thing. That's the power balance of multi-classing, is that all of these spell casting levels don't stack together. So just make sure that your player is following the rules appropriately, because the multi-classing sorcerer, warlock, paladin, warlock shenanigans, yes, they're strong, but a lot of the times that strength also comes from slight misinterpretations of the rules. Also, Diesel, I know that question was for chat, but I will answer it for you. I have a recording thing I have to do at 10, so I'm going to be here until probably 9 or 9:30, but I'll answer as many questions as I can. But I have a hard stop at 9:30, maybe at 9, because I have a recording later tonight that I have to be at.
Yeah.
I think the real question is, why am I going in a direction that my players don't want to take? If personal quests derail the main story, that's fine. Follow it. The players will love it. That's not, honestly, that's not bad either. To be completely honest, before I was doing shows that were D&D shows, when I'm running D&D for my home game, we have side quests that are completely tangential, that have no ties to anything. They're just fun, and they don't ever come up again. It's not... plot is really unimportant for me in my home games. It's very secondary to player fun. And depending on the group, some groups like stories, some groups kind of just like chaos explosions. I had a group for a while that they took the game very seriously, but they wanted a very silly nonsense plot. So while they were completely invested players, Genuinely, the plot was they were going to win Battle of the Bands. That was the plot. They were a band, and they wanted to travel to different kingdoms and do battles of the bands to become the best band. They didn't want a deeper plot than that. They all had really fucking hectic, edgy characters that were very funny, like stereotypes of musicians. But like that was it, man. It was basically Monster of the Week, but with different towns. Like there was not a plot. The plot was we're traveling to become the Battle of the Bands. And it was an excuse for me to have them encounter a variety of cartoonishly different things because every place they would go would be different. But like you barely need a plot. You need enough plot for your players to have fun. That's literally it.
And if you are dragging them down a plot that they're not interested in, that's a problem. But also conversely, if one of your players is dragging everyone down a plot that the rest of your players and you aren't interested in, that's also a problem, right? So it's just about finding consensus on what everyone's interested in.
Yeah. This question I want to answer because we don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but basically, somebody's running a game online, they want to figure out how to get more comfortable with VTTs. Here's the thing. This is what I did when I started running games with VTTs. I learned how to use the VTT well enough to guide my players through it. And then what I did was I basically ran it like a session where I sat with my players online and we built their characters, including like the functions on the character sheet in Roll20. We literally, like, the session was us playing with Roll20 as a toy. Me being like, here is the ruler. Everybody, let's measure shit. Here's the drawing thing. Let's draw stuff. Here is, you know what I mean? Like, taking them through it, just literally having them play with it. And that was what I did, and that helped a lot. But the first step was I had to get comfortable enough with it in order to take them on that journey. I don't really have more feedback than that on that. I think it's like one of those things where it's just a little tricksy. I don't have a favorite color. I'm colorblind. All color is lame, except for the ones that you guys don't see because your eyes are very limited. Next question. Sorry, I skipped the color. I skipped the color question because color is irrelevant to creatures that don't need to see it. I don't quite know how to express this problem, but I'll do my best. That's a great. I'm pumped.
Yeah.
I'm making a Hollow Knight campaign setting, but the region that appears in Hollow Knight, I think, is a little too restrictive for a D&D game. So I'm homebrewing a new kingdom for the setting to take place in. However, I've been given the advice that if I'm making a new kingdom and not making just Hollow Knight as a setting, then this new kingdom has to have its own new main shtick. How do I go about that? Why does your kingdom need to have its own? What? Okay, I apologize for my lack of knowledge of Hollow Knight, but I'm going to answer this question as well as I can. If you think the Hollow Knight shtick can be expressed in the town without needing to make a new shtick, then that's fine. I will say this, regardless of the tone of your setting, regardless of whether it's based off of something from fiction or out of your brain, every single town that you want to matter, like if there's a place that you want your players to remember, that it matters to them, that they return to, all of it should have a shtick. Players aren't gonna remember, like, let's use Critical Role as an example, okay? Your players aren't gonna remember the difference between Taldore and Rockledockle or whatever. Like you have to sort of go in the opposite direction of that. Like, every single town that you want your players to remember, you should be able to elevator pitch that town. You should be able to describe that town in 3 sentences in a way that makes it distinct from every other town, I think. And it doesn't need to be... It could be less than 3 sentences. It could be as simple as it's a normal little hamlet, except there is a witch that lives outside of town, and it's the only hag that people are comfortable with because she made a deal with them not to mess with any of the townsfolk, but only to mess with the neighboring town. Like, that's all. That's really weird and interesting. but that it doesn't need to be more than that, but that's a shtick. So like if you're gonna have, because generic kingdom is just generic kingdom. So if you feel like if you need to put, also just acknowledging, if you're building a campaign based around a Hollow Knight and you're taking out the Hollow Knight, are you building a campaign based around Hollow Knight? I don't know, but that's something I think to think about for sort of more of an esoteric
I don't think they're taking out
perspective.
Hollow Knight. I think they're adding something new, and I don't know if shtick in this instance is referring to like it's possible that what they mean is that every kingdom in Hollow Knight has a gimmick, and they're being informed that if they want to make a new quote Hollow Knight kingdom,
so there's like the jumping there's the jumping zone and the ice zone,
I'm fully
and the poopy zone.
It's a video, it's an indie video game, so like yeah, probably right, like that seems realistic to me. So if that is the case, then like, does it need its own? I don't know. That's kind of up to you. Are you using it to extend an additional kingdom, an existing kingdom? Are you creating a full additional kingdom? Do you want it to have its own gimmick? Do you, like, you're playing D&D, not Hollow Knight. So you kind of get to decide what that means.
Yeah. I also think, though, the bigger takeaway is it doesn't matter what the theme of your the theme of your castle is or your kingdom. It should have a vibe, and it should have a vibe that the players should be able to express to each other very quickly and know immediately what we're talking about. Like, hey man, let's go to, like, if I say, like, it's like, hey, let's go to the castle, I should be able to say, yeah, let's go to the castle where everybody had the crazy eyes, or let's go to the castle where everything was purple, or let's go to the castle that was made of cheese. Like, I should be able to quickly reference that, and the players can be like, oh yeah, that town was nuts. It's just, makes it feel more alive.
Yep, agreed.
Pat, how do you feel about new dungeon masters? Wait, it's Shades. I'm not trying to remove Hollow Knight Park, just not using the locations that appear in the game. Yeah, so just make it if you're pulling out some unique gimmick, just put in a new one. I think all places should have unique gimmicks. Pat, if somebody's new to being a dungeon master, how much magical homebrew should they do? Spellcasting.
Mechanically, very little.
Well, let me ask you this. How would you feel about a fairly new DM that is planning to DM during summer break, and they have an idea of having 2 or more spellcasters being able to come together and cast spells that you can't cast as one's caster? How would recommend doing this mechanic-wise?
That was actually a little easier.
It's interesting, but like, what are spells that 2 need more than 1 caster?
Well, and that therein lies, I think, the thing where it's just like it's just kind of GM fiat, right? Like what you've done is you've said allowing your spellcasters to come together and perform rituals that have effects in your world, and then that's just playing D&D, baby.
Yeah,
just they got to go get the reagents or the components. They put them together, then they do the ritual, and then it has the pre-built narrative effect that you want it to have, right?
Yes. Well, because magic in D&D is inherently a little bit stronger than other stuff. So you want to be careful with how to power balance that, but think about it almost from a really like a video game design perspective. If you want it to be satisfying when your player, it's way more satisfying to get the super glowing sword of Punchy Kicky if you get it by completing the quest and learning its history and getting the thing and smashing the guy that had it before you. So like, whatever you turn these things into, I agree 100% with Pat. Make it like a quest. Make it like there are these ancient special spell scrolls that are written in such a way that a spell can be written on both sides, but it requires 2 casters on either side to read at the same time to cast, but they're long and forgotten, and they do these old ancient magics. And I would also make them not often usable. Like, I would almost make them like big one-time use power buttons, because the other thing is that if you're designing new stuff and you're nervous about making it balanced, you don't have to worry about that if you can only use it one time. Because if you can only use it one time, it's totally cool to do a completely overpowered thing one time. Like, that's not bad. That's fun.
Yeah. Also, it's not just easier for you from a balance perspective. It's more fun for your players because they now have a big red button, and every time they get into a jam, they're thinking, is now the time that I spend spend this resource and hit the big red button? And that becomes a minigame for free. You don't have to do anything. They're just constantly thinking about whether or not now's the time to drop the bomb. And so it makes it more fun than if you could do it once a day. Because if you could do it once a day, it just trivializes combat and they don't feel any type of way about whether or not they use it. Of course, they're going to use it. It's something that they have once a day. So, you can have these things do whatever you want. Instant kills, rewrite the last hour of time, make pudding fall from the sky. You can make it do whatever
you, Patrick.
You want.
Do you know what I was about? I was literally about to say chocolate explosion.
You love to see it.
That's crazy. I wish I could.
Wild.
I can't. There's no way I can prove that. That was literally that was crazy. I was thinking about explosion chocolates.
That's every good ritual has a chocolate explosion somewhere in it.
All right, okay. Let's give Chad a chance to ask a question, but I'm gonna just. The next question I'm going to answer because I don't want to avoid questions that I think are worth answering, but my answer is basically going to be I don't think you should do this. So maybe chat can talk me out of it. We'll see what happens. But here's the next question. Let's see. I want to run a time loop, Groundhog Day style. Anything pop up to keep in mind to keep it fun. Any things that would break in a campaign that is one day over and over and over again. I think the thing that will break, if it's one thing over and over again, is the excitement of the players. The only way I think you can make that work is a insane amount of work on your part to make it so the players actually have cool exploration of different reactions and actions to try, and you are like fucking ready for it. And on top of that, you essentially allowed them to speed run through things. Like if they find the path that lets them ally with the governor, they should get to skip to being allied with the governor and not have to run through that every single time. But fuck, man, that's a hard thing to run, and I want to encourage you to not do it. But I acknowledge that that's not a nice thing to do. So I'm curious what Patrick has to say.
Yeah, I'm gonna push back a little bit because it is a big challenge, 100%. I will acknowledge that, and if you are going to be disappointed if it doesn't go well, then maybe this isn't the thing for you, right? But if you're willing to take a little bit of a risk, I think you might find that there's some potential payoff here. And I want to talk about the 11th hour from the Adventure Zone, Taz Balance, which effectively did this. And minor spoilers, but Griffin McElroy did two things that were really, really clever. And one thing that was just really hard. The one thing that he did that was really hard was he mapped out a whole town, pretty much everyone that you could interact with, a series of puzzles that required solving kind of each of them to solve each other, right? Like it was like a knot of three different puzzles that then eventually revealed a secret that undid the time loop and got them through the other side of the time loop. That was the hard work that he did. The two things that he did that I think were very, very clever were, one, like Cinder just said, save points, checkpoints. He established immediately after they realized that they were in a loop, you can use your first interaction. For them, it was arriving at a town and talking to someone who was guarding the town. You can use that first interaction to always skip to anywhere else you have already been. And effectively say, I'll just let you make every decision and every check identical to that process. You can just jump to where you were last.
But man, in order for that to work, you need to do the thing where you essentially map out the route of everyone in the town, because you need to know where the milkmaid is at 2 p.m., even if people are doing the plan where they're talking to the bishop, because they might go to talk to the bishop and decide to sprint to the milkmaid.
Yeah, this is the other thing that he did that was very clever that I don't know is necessary, but it helped him a lot. It was not a day, it was 1 hour. The party arrived at 10 a.m., and at 11 a.m., the town was destroyed.
Yeah.
And the destruction led back to the loop. And they began the next day, they began the same day over again at 10 a.m. And so he knew where everyone in town was for that hour and charted out this faction is attempting to pull a bank heist in this way, and the bank heist leads to this explosion, which is coincidental to this other thing that's happening. He had like 6 or 7 of these things plotted out, and there were moments where they were like, oh, we need to go find that faction, and they went to the wrong place because the faction had already left. They had already gone to the thing. Trying to make it more than an hour, really, really fucking hard.
Because I'm
Trying
impatient,
to make it more
I'm
than a
just
town.
gonna super chat my question. How far should I allow rule of cool, and if it make the players happy and have fun should I allow? So how far should I fudge the rules?
Diesel, we're going to answer your question in a minute, but I want to finish this one first. But we will answer your question next. Thank you for the 10. Oh my goodness, very kind of you.
Oh, it was for the audio.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know how to tell people that I'm getting a text-to-speech message. I just muted you.
No, it's fine. But yeah, so I think those are the things that you potentially would need to do to make that work. It's not easy, but if you want to swing it, it could be potentially rewarding.
It's just a lot of work. It's just a lot of work. I think that it's just a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Pat, you said something at the end that I think is also really important. If it's rewarding.
Yeah.
Your players have to want to do this adventure. This is not an adventure that you can... if your players aren't in it for this, this is not going to be fun for them. The other thing is you have to come to terms with the fact that if you are playing D&D not publicly and you are in a Groundhog's Day situation, your players are going to be murder hobos for a long time.
Yeah.
And you just got to be down to clown for that. Because if that's the nature of a Groundhog's Day D&D campaign, that's not being...
It removes the consequence,
there's no consequences. You can do whatever the fuck you want. Do you know what I mean?
I will... I will also say, just to underscore Cinder's point, like the McElroys had a follow-up conversation shortly after the 11th hour where all 3 of the players were like, when I figured out that this was a time loop, it was the coolest thing that anyone has ever done in a TTRPG that I've ever played. They were real down to clown on that one.
Yes.
If your players don't share that belief, they're going to be fucking miserable, and it will be a lot of work for nothing.
Yeah. So you gotta be a little conscientious of that. Okay, let's take a look at Diesel's question.
Yeah, Diesel dropped a tip, huh?
Yeah, it was very, very generous. Why are you so generous, you psychopath? No, I appreciate it. Diesel says, how far should I allow rule of cool? And if it makes the players happy and have fun, should I allow? How far should I fudge the rules? So what's the limit of rule of cool? I have an immediate thought if you want me to respond to this one first.
Yeah, of course, man. Yeah.
I think the rule of cool stops being a good idea when it becomes either the normal thing, like it is happening more than the game mechanics are happening, or if it is outshining another player or another character in their game mechanics. Those are the 2 things. Like, you don't want to do rule of cool to the point where you're rule of cooling and not playing D&D, because at that point there are other systems that are basically designed for every single thing to be a rule of cool choice, and you should just play one of those games, I think. But also, like, if you're rule of cooling something in a way that diminishes another character's power or story, then I think that that's not good.
I have a slightly different interpretation, but I don't disagree with anything that you said at all.
Sure.
I think people often misrepresent the rule of cool. I think that in the same way that I think that a lot of people who play TTRPGs misrepresent improvisations, yes, and. In both instances, you are not saying, as a GM or a participant in any way, this happens in exactly the way that it has been described and in ways that violate the contract that we have all entered into for this play space, which in the case of D&D is obviously the rules of D&D.
Mm-hmm.
What it is what you have suggested is a great narrative idea that doesn't immediately conform to an existing prescribed rule. I am going to try to interpret how we can accept that you want to do that. Not accept that it's going to work, accept that you want to do that. Yes, and is listening to what you're saying and showing up with that positive extension on the attempt, right? And a lot of the time what I'll do in situations like that is ask, what are you hoping to achieve here?
Yeah.
Get a very clear answer on that, and then figure out how to put stakes around it, right? What do you have to sacrifice in order to do this? Or what do you have to risk in order to try this? And in doing so, you're kind of keeping the playing field a little bit more level and not developing the expectation of, oh, as a player, because my GM honors the quote rule of cool, I can just do whatever I want, right? You're making it part of the construction of the narrative as opposed to just allowing people to kind of freeform play. And not that there's anything wrong with freeform play. It's just a different game, as Cinder pointed out.
Yeah.
So
no, I think it's, I think that's a good way to think about it, is like a rule of cool moment makes sense, I think, kind of when it makes sense. And also that thing that you said, Pat, of ask your players what their goal is and trying to help them accomplish that goal, I think is a much better way of thinking. I think that's a better way of thinking about it.
And also not just trying to help them accomplish the goal, because the GM, you could always just say, yes, you get this, you win, hooray. But providing them, like, making that goal crystal clear and then giving them stakes and hurdles to overcome.
Yeah.
In order to
I want to try
there.
to seduce the dragon. Okay, you can, but, if it, it could potentially lead to this, this, and this, which is not necessarily the thing that you want. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Dude, why are people so obsessed with that meme still? It's so like overdone. You know what I mean?
D&D eats itself and lives forever. Yes.
Don't you take a Barbara Kingsolver quote and turn it into a D&D reference?
Too late. I just did.
Oh my god, I hate that.
I mostly did it because it would annoy you.
Yeah. Well, here's a question. Hey,
Yeah.
Cinder. He gave an example in YouTube chat. I think we addressed that example. Basically, he said, what if he can make an intimidation check by like biting someone's skull? Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable. But like, what you might say to that, or might maybe frighten a creature. Like, yeah, but like, a creature frightened by you one round might turn into a hostile creature the next, or it might lead to like, I don't know, there's all sorts of directions you could take it in. I think that the idea of actions and consequences is a good way to think about it. I'm currently a player in a campaign with some friends. We all do our best to remember to take notes and remember what has happened so far, but I have trouble remembering things sometimes and have to ask the DM and others for a reminder. Because of this, the DM is getting annoyed at me for taking too long on combat terms. I would argue, I guess you're not remembering what's happening in combat then. Forgetting NPC names. No. There's a bunch of things they're getting annoyed with them for. They're getting annoyed with me for taking long turns in combat, forgetting NPC names, or specific things that happened in the past. I personally don't think I do it often. Maybe I gotta ask 1 or 2 questions a session, and sometimes if at all. If sometimes feels like they're putting more on me than what I'm doing, I don't think the DM should get as mad as they do as far as threatening to kick me from a game one session over a complication over a moment. It was my fault, though. I don't think there was a threat warranted. This, to me, sounds like your dungeon master does not do a good job of communicating their emotions. I think that's right. Probably what's happening here is the dungeon master feels like you are not paying attention, or they feel like you are not caring enough. And I don't think that is what's happening, but that seems like that's what they're feeling, and they are not expressing that in a healthy way. Or you guys have not had a sort of more open conversation that is not a confrontational conversation about, like, it is literally complicated for you to keep track of shit. If you don't feel like you can have a conversation with your dungeon master where you can talk about your feelings and they can respond in a way that is going to be healthy, then I'm not sure there is a solution other than finding a dungeon master that's not an asshole. But, like,
we don't know that that's where they're at.
Yeah, right? I don't know I don't know the details of the situation, but I'm assuming that you guys have not attempted to have a honest emotional conversation that is not an argument about this. That is the first thing to do. If that doesn't feel reasonable, if you aren't comfortable trying to do that, then you have to ask yourself a very difficult question, which is, am I okay with dealing with this, or should I just fucking leave? And I think that either one is fine. But you can't decide to stay and not be okay with it, because that's not fair to you or to the other people. I think it's worth trying to solve the problem by talking about it. But, like, if your dungeon master is unwilling to have a conversation with you, then there's not much you can do.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, Cinder, you're spot on, right? Like, every D&D game has a couple of instances of somebody
I
being
fucking
like,
ask. I have to ask. I don't remember a goddamn thing. I don't know. I don't remember anything. I have to ask questions every fucking time.
Yeah.
No, dungeon master shouldn't be a forget. Like, that's a dungeon master that, like, cares too much, or their world is too complicated, or they think you don't, or they misinterpret your genuine struggle to remember things, which is a reasonable and normal struggle, as lack of care.
Which, I could see a situation. I've actually been a GM in a situation where there was genuine lack of care. And because there was genuine lack of care, there was a lot of, people weren't paying attention. They weren't present. They weren't, like, focused on the game, not to an obsessive degree, but even just to, like, a passing degree. It was very clear that they weren't in it, right? And the constant, like, what were we doing? What was going on? I need you to run that back for me. When it's every single turn, it does feel disrespectful, but that calls back to Cinder's assertion of, like, you have to be able to have that conversation. And, like, when that happened to me, I went to my players and I was like, hey, it really feels like you guys aren't engaged here. And I think in that one particular instance, their response was to reflect and be like, yeah, we're really just not feeling this game. And we wrapped it. Yeah. And that was fine. It was maybe a little demoralizing, but it was like, it had to happen, right? Because that's just a thing that you need to be able to have conversations about if you're going to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think that Diesel, if I didn't answer your question clearly, I'm happy to talk about it more, but I thought I did. But if you feel like I need to say more, I'm happy to. I think that you also, what I'm trying to do is, like, imagine being a player in that position and the dungeon master, like, not taking that time to have that conversation, though. You know what I mean? Like, it's so hard as a player to navigate helping a dungeon master to do a better job of communicating and making everyone have fun, if that dungeon master is unwilling to participate in that conversation just because they hold all the power in D&D, which is why you should have genuinely zero patience for a dungeon master that is unwilling to do that. And by zero patience, I do not mean argue. I do not mean start conflict. I mean very politely be like, this game isn't really for me, and find a dungeon master that does have that patience, because dungeon masters need to work with their players. They have too much power to not do it. It's not fair. It's just not fair if they don't.
I'm not going to substantiate this claim, but it is one of the biggest design flaws in D&D, is how much power and also responsibility is given to the GM.
Yeah.
It's a conversation for another day.
It's a good question, though. I'm really sorry. Also, I don't know if this helps, but, like, I do just want to acknowledge that this is a shitty situation to be in, and if you are struggling in it, you shouldn't be thinking about it like, what am I doing wrong? It's totally reasonable for you to acknowledge the situation, be like, this is a bummer to be in, and I don't have to feel like I am doing something wrong. I can just feel like it's a bummer situation. I don't need to add guilt on top of that. Okay?
100%. Especially because you came into this saying, like, I take notes, I pay attention, I want to be there. I'm just misremembering details, or I'm gapping on, my memory lapses on details. And, like, that's, you clearly are invested.
Yeah, so Cross is also saying that, like, the guy just runs a really complicated, deep world lore. I mean, that's the other thing, dude. Like, it's not fair as a dungeon master to run a completely super deep world. Like, I don't know how old you are, and I don't want to make an assumption, but my guess would be that you are college age, or somewhere in the early post-college, early pre-college, because if you are somebody that starts playing D&D or is playing D&D when you are in the working world as an adult,
Yeah.
you don't have time to learn somebody's world lore. Like, if your friend invited me to play in their campaign, they would hate me as a player because I don't have time to read a fucking lore book and learn all that. I have time to make a fun character that's going to engage with people and be goofy, but like, that's just unrealistic to expect that of adults at a certain point in time. And it's fun when people can. It's very special when people can, but part of this might be your dungeon master being a little bit
precious.
And unrealistic about how much patience and energy and time it goes into like keeping track of like a world setting. You know what I mean? I don't think it's necessarily a toxic DM. I just think it might be a DM that really cares and has unrealistic expectations of what their players should be doing to play the game. Yeah, that's how I feel about that. Here's another question. We'll answer this question next. Let's give Chad a second. Let's see if anybody asks anything. I'll scroll up a little bit.
Come on, Chad, don't let us down.
No, it's fine.
Don't let us down, Chad.
It would feel like another job. I mean, kinda. I mean, the thing is, playing D&D. Think about it. Like I talk about this on my homebrew streams a lot. If any of you have ever seen any of my homebrew streams, people don't give a shit about your writing. No one does.
No.
The only people, like, genuinely, the only people that give a shit about your writing are maybe one of your parents. Definitely not both of them. That's listen. Do you want me to be honest? Are we being honest with these people, or are we being honest with these people? That's the most accurate thing I ever said. That's the most accurate thing I ever said.
Oh my!
You know it's true.
God.
You know it's true.
Absolutely,
it's true for both of us. It's true for every single person.
I hate that.
Yeah, your parents either don't give a shit or one of them gives a shit. That's the way it works. It's just the way that works. It's fine. Doesn't mean they don't love you. That's just the way that it works. Just the way that it works.
Somebody fucking clip that. That's a fucking short. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's just the way that it works. Quispy, we're still accepting questions, but I have a sharp cutoff time, so I'm gonna answer as many as I can. We don't have a crazy amount left. You're happy with the answer, and in thinking about it, thought it was a good answer. Okay, cool. Listen, Diesel. I don't like leaving people feeling like they're getting shafted. You know?
Yeah.
I don't remember what I was saying after that comment, but it was a good comment.
Nobody cares about your writing. Nobody cares about your writing.
Nobody cares about your writing. So like, no one wants to read your world lore. If I was, dude, I'm gonna be really honest, man. If fucking Brendan Lee Mulligan called me up and said, I want you to play in a D&D campaign, I would make a character that would not require me to read that. I don't want to read that much of his world lore, you know? Like, your buddy doesn't want to take hours out of their time to read your diary-style, you know, self-masturbatory world building that is maybe going to be important for part of the campaign. It doesn't matter how cool it is. It doesn't. It's a lot. It's people don't want to do that. No one wants to do that. Yep. It doesn't matter. Yep. Is that a bummer? Sure, it's a bummer. Get over it. Doesn't matter. It's a reality of the universe. How do you accomplish figuring that out in a way? Well, then, you know what you do? You don't do the world lore in a giant fucking world book. You pick aspects of the world lore that you can turn into, like, locations or things that are happening in the game, and you have the people learn the world lore because they want to, because they are traveling and they see a giant sword sticking out of the ground that's the size of a building, and they're curious about that. You know? That's how you make world lore happen. But to expect your players to, like, read and remember and keep track of world lore that is outside of, like, you putting energy into it feels like you're giving your players homework, which I think at a certain point is just something that players of a certain age are just not going to put up with. Or they are people that have an exceedingly large amount of free time and or money to allow for them to have free time, and they can afford that. Anybody that's working and or with family, though, they don't got time. They don't got time.
Yeah. We've also we've wandered off of the original question, but I do just want to toss onto the pyre here. If you are a GM and you have struggled with this in the past, the single hack for making your players implicitly care about your world lore is have them write it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Or
that's my piece of advice.
Give them chocolate-covered peanut butter crackers.
I mean, you could do that, but they're still not going to care about your world lore.
Yeah, but if you give them a lot, they will listen.
They will listen. They're not.
And then you give them tummy aches.
Clear that there's a distinction there, you know?
Yeah, fine. Speaking of distinctions, kind of psychological, guys. I love you all, but the amount of spelling mistakes I've been seeing in these questions, you guys are
Boy,
silly.
howdy.
A player I play with in a long RP campaign doesn't really okay, let me read that sentence in a way that that was not their mistake, that was me reading it badly. A player I play with in a long roleplay campaign doesn't really like talking about his wants in the story, how his character's arc would develop, and what he would like for the game to be more fun. He still enjoys playing, but extremely casually with no meta discussion about the campaign. How do I get him to talk with the DM and express his wants and likes so the DM has it easier to make the game everyone will enjoy? I am gonna say I have a hot take here.
Yeah, I think I might agree with you.
I have a player exactly like this. And do you know what I do? Nothing. They are having fun. They bring positive energy to the table. They've got a very simple character that's always very goal-oriented because they don't give a shit about anything other than what's in front of them. And the player is having really fun, and they don't make anybody else feel uncomfortable. They don't take up too much space. If one player... Some people want to sit in the back seat. Some people would rather watch somebody play a video game than play a video game. And there is space for those people in D&D.
Yep.
Yeah, they're Legolas. Exactly. That's that's straight up Legolas. Straight up.
It's so...
no personality,
so
no plot, just wants to shoot arrows and do kickflips off of giant elephants.
Himbo energy, truly. Yeah. It's so funny because
were you going to say something similar or different?
I was going to say something similar. That is largely Emily's.
This is also one of my favorite kinds of players, by the way.
Yeah, it's Emily's preferred play style, and like there have been a couple of times where, because we do a show, we've had to push through that a little bit, just because like they're, from a narrative perspective or show crafting perspective, the expectations of a player are a little bit different. But I'm gonna be honest, she's at her fucking best as a player and a performer when she can fill that role, when she can be in the background tying together those loose moments that are just immediately in front of her, or providing some comedic relief or whatever the fuck, right? Like that's where she enjoys spending most of her time, and that's where she really, really thrives. And so like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's good stuff. Not everybody needs to be theory crafting everything they do as a player, Yeah.
Somebody said they're called fighters. This is fighters that you're
I have never encountered a fighter with anything other than the most main character energy. I've never encountered anyone who's willing to play a fighter who doesn't need to make the whole scene about them and their shit that they had to put onto the fighter, because a fighter is a blank canvas.
I will say that I don't necessarily think the fighters that I play or theory craft for potential campaigns have main character energy. But they definitely have like bit character or side main character energy. Like they are almost always not the guy that's like, hello, here's what we're gonna do, but they are always the guy that's on the side that's like, here's what we're really gonna do. like they did. It's that kind of his main character energy. Now that I think
a little bit. I feel like if you the support characters, Legolas is such a great example. Support characters are rangers, sometimes paladins. Occasionally, this is going to be a hot take, occasionally bards, not often, but occasionally, maybe barbarians. That's it. That's my spicy take on who plays support character.
Right. I listen, I won't take that, or I don't know how I feel about that. I got to think about it a little bit, but yeah, I don't know, man. I don't see this as a problem. Like, it sounds like this is something that you are not liking, or you are worried that it's not fun. But if everyone's having fun, then it's probably fine. And if it's something that you are struggling with, but everyone else is okay with it, this might be one of those situations where, as a part of a D&D group, you have to just acknowledge that sometimes what you want the most is not what is best. And that if it's okay, if everyone else is okay with this guy being a little bit of like a goof and just kind of hanging and being a character that's just sort of there, then maybe it's just, you just got to figure out how to be more comfortable with that. Because it doesn't sound like you're doing anything hurtful. Like, I don't think you need to decide how to be more comfortable with something if anybody is like, taking up space from you or making you feel uncomfortable or unsafe or anything like that. But this is just like it doesn't sound like they're doing any of that. It sounds like like if anything, they are just being the most accommodating yes and player. They're just like, I'm here for it. But maybe I'm over analyzing at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, right? You definitely don't want to be projecting concerns onto them. If they're having a problem, then the answer is talk to them about their problem and ask them what they need for you to help with so that they can get over their problem. If they're not having a problem and nobody else is having a problem, just maybe don't create a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, me too.
Here's a good one. What if you feel you are too young for D&D and don't have many friends who seem enthusiastic to play? I think first of all, regardless, I think that if you are
write this?
Yeah, they did. And I think we're going to answer it because I think children should play D&D. First of all,
I agree.
I'm just gonna. This is. I worked in education for a long time, so I'm just gonna tell you something that I don't care if other people agree with or not. I'm just gonna tell it to you. Don't play D&D with grown-ups. You shouldn't.
Oh, don't do that.
If you are of an age that this is a question you want to ask, you should not play D&D with grown-ups. And I'm not saying that because you couldn't handle it. I'm saying it because the spaces that you will play D&D in will be more comfortable, more safe, and more supportive. Yeah. If you are, they will be better for you if you are playing with other people closer to your age. So I would say realistically, if you are between the ages of like 10 and 13, you probably shouldn't be playing D&D with anybody that's older than like 15, 16.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to be playing, you don't want to be playing with grown-ups. You just don't. It's going to save you so many things that you don't have to deal with by avoiding that. That being said, how do you find people to play D&D with? Well, one of the things
I do want to caveat that with if your parents want to play D&D, I've seen that work a lot.
Yes,
and that's fine.
Yes. Okay, so that was what I get into. There's exceptions. Your parents, right? Your uncles, your aunts, your family, your trusted family friend. Like I plan on running D&D for my friends' kids when they get old enough. But the other thing that you can get access to when you are a kid, which is sometimes very nice, is that there are often community games that are more kid-oriented. So, for example, a lot of public libraries have D&D games.
That is how I started playing D&D.
A lot of public libraries have D&D games. The other thing is that a lot of schools have maybe they don't have a D&D club, but they have board game clubs or clubs that are sort of D&D adjacent that might be good places to find people to play D&D. And depending on like what city you live in, there probably is a teacher or two at your school that are people that play those sorts of games. So that's the thing, is like you're not really ever I would say you're too young to play D&D if you are probably under the age of 7. 6-year-olds
even then, I think like with your parents, it's probably...
but like because I just mean like I used to work with pre-K, and like you just have to play an imagination game. They don't have the patience for it. Like a 6-year-old can't sit for an hour and do a thing. That's just not realistic.
And D&D takes more than an hour.
But anybody can play. It's really just a matter of finding a table that's comfortable and safe. And the easiest way to find a table that's comfortable and safe as a child is using your parents as a resource, using your school as a resource, and if you have trusted local community centers like a library or a YMCA or something like that.
I will also throw out, Cinder, you kind of throw out like maybe there's a teacher who plays D&D or something. I would even say that a teacher is probably pushing it for like grown-ups that you want to play D&D with.
No, but like they might be running like a D&D club or something.
They might be running a club, or if they're not, and chat just brought this up, they might be excited to help give you space to start one. Yeah, and that is honestly potentially a great way to make friends if you can figure out, and don't get me wrong, I know what it's like to like try something new and start something new, and there's always a lot of anxiety around it. But like if you have access to that and you could throw together a group, D&D is a great way to make new friends. We often hear a lot about like, oh, I don't have enough friends to play D&D. Start playing D&D. Invite people to play D&D, and you will make friends very quickly. Right? It's how I met my wife. I'm not
my wife. Sorry. I don't know where that came from.
The fucking 2010 film Borat.
There's a stand-up comedian that talks all about when he got married and how much he loves saying the phrase "his wife," my wife, and he was like, you know, you sound so authoritative when you say like, "Sorry guys, I gotta go." Like my girlfriend's not feeling well. Everyone's like, "Who's this fucking loser?" But when you go, "I have to go take care of my wife," my wife. My wife is not like that. There's power in that. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, okay, excuse me. Let's get out of this guy's way. My wife.
Absolutely. But yeah, that's how I met Emily. Was inviting her to play D&D. It's also how I met Cinder and like a bunch of my other adult friends. As you know, so like it's a great way to meet. It's a great way to find people to play D&D with. Is to invite people to play D&D with you.
John Mulaney, thank you, Dice. It was John Mulaney.
Is it John Mulaney? It felt like a John Mulaney thing.
He's a funny guy.
Like,
He's a funny guy.
Know.
I knew it was. I was thinking John Mulaney or Jim Gaffigan.
Oh God, I guess they kind of
very
are
different.
Similar, aren't
well,
they?
No, they're very different in their expression, but they are both very. They make a lot of their jokes cover similar topics of like family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everett says, I'm a fairly new DM, and I was wondering how do I make fetch quests more interesting and exciting for my players? I think that it's not a matter of making, like, why are they going on a fetch quest? Why do they have to do a fetch quest?
If you don't think they're interesting and exciting, why do you need them to do a fetch quest?
Yeah, you don't need to put fetch quests in your game. Put quests that you think are interesting and exciting.
Can we take a little detour here and let me rant about how frustrating it is that we use the term quest in D&D? Sure. In the way that we use it in like an RPG, right? A video game. Because like in a video game, when you think about a quest is it's a piece of computer code. It's an instruction set that effectively says like if they achieve this particular thing, then they get a reward. Because at the end of the day, video games are all just like push button get reward in complicated layers. D&D isn't that, right? And I think that it fundamentally it's really important to understand that you can derive real world building and like plot from intrinsic character motivation. It's not a fetch quest if I need to get medicine for my dying parent, right? That's not a fetch quest. That's a critical objective for the emotional health and relationships that your character is living through, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're on a fetch quest, you just turn D&D into being a DoorDash simulator. Why did you do that to D&D?
Yeah. And I think part of that might come from some of like the older or simpler game design. Like you have to go to this castle to get this crystal, and this cave to get this tube, and this ocean to get this pen, and then put them together to make a staff to go fight the demon god. You know?
But again, all of that, I mean, don't get me wrong. I see what you're referencing, and I agree with you that like old school style gaming, where your motivation was money, was win points effectively at the end. You know, I mean, obviously,
but you still have to make them interesting. Like there has to what makes those fetch quests interesting is the stakes.
We're trying to put the staff together to kill the evil thing, right?
Yeah, like the fetch quest is important because every day that we aren't doing this, the demon lord is turning more people into cottage cheese or whatever they're doing.
Right.
You know, and maybe, and you can also, the other thing is that if you sort of wrote yourself into a corner where you kind of need to do like a MacGuffin style fetch quest, you can always turn it on its head in a variety of ways. So what if somebody else got it first? And now you have to like figure out who and like go convince them to join you or to steal it from them. Or what if like, you're trying to do your fetch quest, but then the assassins that need revenge on you because you killed their grandpa attack you, and now you got to figure out how to deal with the assassins while also trying to get the MacGuffin. You know what I mean? Like you can add personal stakes into it if worst case scenario and you are running a really like you have to go pick up the mail and deliver it to someone's house, and for whatever reason you've decided you need that to be the quest. The solution is to make delivering that mail really matter specifically to the players. And then on top of that, it's to put things into that journey that are unexpected in a way that like give the journey a new vibe and flavor. Yeah.
I would actually, if you want like a more technical, non-ranty answer to that question that dovetails off of what Cinder just said about like provide stakes. if you get a minute to do this, look up Apocalypse World and specifically 2 GM tools from Apocalypse World. It's powered by the Apocalypse game. It's the powered by the Apocalypse game. It's the first one. And there are 2 tools in that game called clocks and fronts. And clocks and fronts are 2 systems of managing the way that the world is interacting with your players in spaces. Fronts are a little too big for me to sum up very nicely here, but the short version is the assassins, right? It's stuff that's looming, impending threat to the players achieving what they want to achieve. Clocks are how quickly that's going to happen, or the players are going to implicitly fail if they don't take action, right?
Yeah.
So like the easiest way to make a fetch quest interesting is if you don't get the mail in the next 10 minutes, it's going to light on fire and then everyone you know will die, right? Whatever it is. And those are 2 mechanical tools that I use every single time I run a game to make every quest, quote, quest, if we use that term, feel like it really means something to players because it's a framing tool.
Yeah, I like what Dice said. I kind of feel that way about it.
Yeah.
If it's not interesting, skip it. Just say you got the mushrooms from the forest. You're there.
Montages are a GM's best friend that just fucking narrate how they do it, and then they're back, and then you just keep going.
Yeah, Brandon says, can I ask a question? Are games like Baldur's Gate convoluting the TTRPG space? I feel like a lot of new players are expecting the video game mechanics and fully realized story arcs. I mean, no more or less than like Critical Role, right? Like,
I was going to say,
like
are we seeing the emergence of the Baldur's Gate effect of the next evolution of the Matt Mercer effect?
Yeah,
the
I mean,
PG
I think the Baldur's Gate effect is just a matter of you need to set expectations. That's what I think it comes down to. It's like maybe that happens to a certain extent, but if you say clearly, guys, this is like Baldur's Gate, but it's actually pretty different. Did I get quieter? Did Cinder get quiet? Am I loud? Am I quiet? Am I quiet? Am I quiet? I don't know.
Try screaming really loud.
No worries for lack of punctuation. That was fine.
Yeah,
I understood the question.
okay.
I just think that, Baldur's Gate issue, maybe, but I think, again, it's one of those things where you have to just set expectations. You have to be realistic about, like, hey, Baldur's Gate is not D&D. The spells work differently. The balance for combat works differently. Interaction between things work differently. Why? Because Baldur's Gate 3 is designed for one person to play by themselves with a computer. D&D is designed for people to play with each other with a dungeon master. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And you are not a computer. And also...
So you gotta just set them expectations.
Yeah, 100%. And sometimes, listen, especially if you're new to the game, and especially if you're playing with people who are coming in off of Baldur's Gate, which, suggests that they're probably new to the game as well, sometimes they're just not going to like it, right? Like, sometimes they're going to get into it, and the difference is going to be like, oh, I wanted Baldur's Gate, but in this different medium with my friends, and it's like, that's just not what it is, right?
Like when I started, you play Baldur's Gate multiplayer, then that's what that is. Yeah,
which is fun, but it's just a different thing. So like, also don't think that set expectations, but also don't think that you're singularly responsible for convincing them that those discrepancies are good, right? Just like be clear.
Sponge said we could call it the bald effect, which I think is very funny.
Bald effect.
Yeah, I'm on my way, guys. I have like a little tuft, and then it's gonna disappear, and then I'm gonna be very bald.
As far as I'm aware, there's one bald character playable character in Baldur's Gate, other than custom character, and it's the one voiced by Matt. It's the one voiced. Well, but there's one that's already bald, and it's the one that's voiced by Matt Mercer. So it's just Matt Mercer again.
I am Matt Mercer. Wouldn't that be weird if I peeled off my skin and I was Matt Mercer? That'd be so weird. I bet chat would be so freaked out. But they'd be so bunch of losers. They'd be so scared, like babies. Let's get mad at my chat for assuming that they would be freaked out if I tore off my skin and became Matt Mercer, because that's what they would do, is like a bunch of babies.
Like bunch of wimps.
Oh, Cinder tore his skin off and turned into another person. That was weird. Oh man, this is good. I need to start making wild assumptions about the way things might be that are totally irrational and irreverent, and then judging people based on assumed reactions. That's so fun. Oh my god.
That's a good thing. That's a
That's a
good bit.
great bit. All right, that's going. You know what? I think that bit is going to start to. It's not exactly like It's not exactly baller. I hardly know her. It's not exactly that, but it is.
Right.
It's close. It's not far either. We've got this question a billion times. We can talk about it really quickly. How do you run interesting naval ship-to-ship combat? It depends entirely on how much your players want to do naval ship-to-ship combat. And if you're really, really keen on it, I think they look for supplements by people that have made it. And let your players interact with that. Mage Hand Press has some really good ship-to-ship combat supplements. I'm sure other people have. Homie and the Dude, which are creators that put out a couple different things, have a whole ship-to-ship combat system that's pretty good. They have an aerial one too, which is pretty cool. And it does it's theater of mind, but very tactical theater of mind, where there's like it's almost like you're playing Risk with like dog fighting and stuff, which is pretty cool.
Oh shit, that's cool. There's a very, very, very quick shorthand that I've seen used in a couple of Dimension 20 arcs that I think are good. They're usually ingrained in more complicated systems, but like if you really just want to slap together ship to ship combat and you want to somehow represent like a ship fighting another ship versus like a ship fighting like a dude, right? Is whatever ship actions you allow your players to take 10x the damage when it's against an individual. So Does Mage Hand do that?
That's what they do with their spaceships. Yeah, they have slang for it. They have mega damage and mega hit points, which are essentially that. So you have, and it's actually cool because it's integrated into their subclasses. So they have like, there's a sorcerer subclass that's like a robotic one. I think it came out before the robotic one that's official, and it has features where it can heal mega hit points, which is not good. You can't use it against creatures. It literally is like you can heal ships is basically what it means, which is cool.
That's cool. That's cool. But yeah, I think that's like the absolute shortest cut to making naval combat feel different is like, just let them do whatever they would do normally on a ship, either their abilities or the ship's like cannons or whatever, and 10x the damage when it's shipped to ground.
The time that I tried to run naval combat and I half made it up, I essentially created positions that people could take up on the ship. And depending on what positions they did, the ship would have different things it could do, and the ship had one initiative, and they could decide what order they went in, but they worked together. So if they all right, we bought 3 cannons, cool. 3 of you could man cannons. We bought an extra sail, cool. 1 of you could like speed boost the ship. Some people will get into stuff where you could like do like turning radius stuff, like Mage Hand Press. That's what they do, where ships have a stat block, and the stat block includes which type of weapons they have, what they shoot, how fast they can go, and how far they can go, but also how much they can turn on a. And a lot of their weapons are directional. So they sort of introduce directional combat mechanics, which is pretty neat.
Yeah.
But I also feel like you kind of don't. I don't know, man. I don't like putting mechanics on players until I know they really want it.
And also keep in mind that there's probably a reason why D&D has never published a solid official ship-to-ship combat system. It's just not really part of the core game. So if you want to add it, make sure your players know that. Make sure that you know that your players want it, and then go find someone who's created some homebrew for it.
Yeah. This is a long question, but they're basically saying this is a person that in real life really enjoys reading puzzles. And on occasion, a puzzle they will read on the internet will show up in a D&D game. And they're wondering how long they should wait before they solve it or give hints. Here's what I'm going to say.
This is why I don't put puzzles in my D&D games.
I was going to say, the very few times that I do put real puzzles in my game that are like genuinely puzzles, where it's not more of like a Zelda puzzle, where it's sort of a puzzle, but it's sort of like move the block somewhere. When it's really just like solve the puzzle. Every time I've done that, I've had one player who solved it. They're the guy that loves puzzles. So here's what I'll say. If you're trying not to be that guy, you need to not solve them. If you know the solution to the puzzle, you keep your mouth shut. That's what I would say. I would say you only attempt to try to solve it in one of 2 circumstances. 1, the players, the other ones are really struggling. Or 2, you're like, I want to make an investigation check to see if I can help solve the puzzle, and then you roll really, really, really high. But like, if you're concerned with how do I do this, the solution is you don't. It's exactly the same thing I would say to a player who understood how a troll worked, but didn't want to immediately reveal that they take fire and acid damage to stop healing. I would just be like, all right, cool. Your character doesn't know that. If you want to play like your character doesn't know that, play like your character doesn't know that. It's fun to roleplay discovering that shit. But yeah, that might also be a thing that you should just talk to your dungeon master about. Be like, hey, just so you know, I love puzzles. So whenever you put a puzzle in the game, I basically know the solution because I've read it before. So if you are going to be putting puzzles in, that's something that like I'm not sure how to navigate. You know, talk to
You should definitely talk to your GM about it. I would say that if it was something that was happening not consistently, because it sounds like it's happening very consistently, and at that point you need to talk to your GM about it so that they can help. You can help solve it mutually, right, together. If it was something that was happening like occasionally, if you this has happened to me a couple of times where I've been playing in a D&D game and somebody will drop like the prisoner's dilemma in front of me, and it's just something that I happen to be very familiar with. I will often just say like, I know this. I know how this is going to shake out. That's not fun for everybody else, I don't think. So I'm gonna sit back until you guys tap me in and ask me what the answer is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. It's one of those things where it's one of those circumstances where like a real world interest can fuck with your ability to enjoy D&D. Because
it's pretty rare though. It really is just puzzles.
Yeah, no, but it is just puzzles, but that's the thing, because a lot of most dungeon masters that I know don't want to make puzzles. We find puzzles. No. So if you are somebody that in real life goes out looking for puzzles, realistically, we're going to find ourselves going down similar YouTube rabbit holes or Reddit rabbit holes. So it is one of those blessing and a curse things. This is a question from Quispy, I think. And Quispy, I think I saw you in the chat. I'm going to be honest with you, man. The question, you need to be a little bit more specific. And you'll understand why when I say this in a second, Patrick. We're going to read it. I'm trying to build an enemy spellcaster. His whole vibe is that he's the purest form of an evil wizard, but also with warlock-inspired flavor and abilities. To emphasize to you how cartoonishly evil he is, his name is Machiavellius Malevolent. What abilities or special actions would make sense for something like that? The reason why I don't have an answer for this is there is not a definition for pure evil without context for where that pure evil takes place within. I think the easiest way to represent pure evil is boring, straight up. And it's basically the Lich from Adventure Time, and it is even something they talk about in the show. The Lich is a boring villain. The only reason why the Lich works as a villain at all is because he is in the show for like 3 seconds, and he is not a character. He is just evil, and he's boring evil. Like he just says scary things, and so the answer is like, it really depends on your game world, man. What is evil? What is evil in your game world? And also maybe as importantly, what is evil in your game world that your players are gonna like resonate with, but also not be like annoyed with or creeped out by or like put off by you being like edgy evil, because edgy evil is just not going to land well. Like you still need to make sure it's like reasonable for like there's a pretty good SNL skit where there's like a gathering of supervillains. It's actually one of the only performances that The Rock has ever done that I think is like a really good performance. And it's like a gathering of supervillains, and it's a contest to see who could make the most evil machine. And one guy's like, I made a machine that controls the weather. Ha ha ha. And one guy's like, I made a machine that does everybody's taxes wrong. And one guy's like, I made a machine that assaults children. And everyone was like, what? And basically the whole gimmick of the skit is that all the villains are like really put off by this one villain because his plan is just too much. And you could end up in that situation where it's like, it's so evil that it's not fun. And it's just like, this is just cringy. But also like, evil really depends on like what is good for the campaign. You know what I mean? Yeah. Evil's not a motivation or a goal. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that my answer is you should give them powers and abilities that help sell the fiction of their character. Whatever that is.
Whatever it is.
I don't know if that's a cop-out answer, but that's the answer I got for you.
I mean, it has to be. It's the only answer that you could possibly give, right? Because it comes down to the alignment thing, which is like, alignment is a false binary in a world where morality is complex, maybe not purely relativistic, but complex. And like, then layer on top of the morality system that you're operating with, the genre expectations that you're operating within, and it gets even more complex, right? Like, yeah, it's pretty fucking evil to assault children, but is that going to be too much for your table, right?
Yeah,
is that going to feel like anything, or is that just going to make people look at you weird?
Yeah, Sauron is a really good example of pure evil, and I think the way Sauron is used in Lord of the Rings is actually a great example of that, where Sauron isn't a character in most of the book. He's like a storm, he's like a thing in the distance that is spoken of. The characters are Saruman. Like, Saruman is a character, like the evil, he
wants something.
Wormtongue is a character. There's evil characters that are characters, but the thing that is pure evil, it sort of has to be separate, because it's just, it's not a thing,
Well, and then at that point, it's not a character or even really evil again. It's just a force of nature. It's as evil as a hurricane.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it just is a thing that happens. It's as evil as a black hole. What does that mean?
Yeah. Pat, we got one more question. We got through everything. We got through all of them.
That's really impressive.
I think some of them were easy, quick answers, and there weren't a crazy amount of them. But this is 25 questions, 26 questions. I feel pretty good about that. All right, last question. It's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
How do I make a good backup plan for players who go into a random direction, suddenly away from the current quest goal, without having to prepare for every possible direction? I
never understand this question.
Dude, I acknowledge that you never understand this question, but that is, I think, because we have such different experiences with the way we started playing D&D. Because this was the fucking bane of my existence this is a thing that I've dealt with a lot as a dungeon master. Because a lot of my players started playing D&D. The thing that excited my players about D&D was the idea of quote-unquote limitless potential. The thing that they were the most excited by was that they could decide which way to walk, and there would be something to explore there.
Don't you decide what's on the other end of that?
Yes. But that logic that you just jumped to is, I don't think, the immediate logic that everyone has. But I do think that's the solution. Sure. The solution is you decide what's in the world. So you have a lot of control over creating the illusion of options based on how much information you give to your players. So, for example, if I give my players a world map, and that world map has 13 different cities in it, and then it has populations of each of those cities and vibes of each of those cities and all this information about each of those cities, then if the players go to any of those cities, I might want to try to have something ready in that city. But if I give my players a world map and it has the names of 5 cities the names of the 12 cities on it or whatever, and I have a plan. I don't have 6 plans. I don't have 13 plans. I have 1 plan. Guess what? That plan could fit in any city, because they don't know what's in any of these cities. You know what I mean? Like, you can always put the thing you need at the end of the road.
Yeah.
I also think you can just, like, the other thing is, like, let me give you another example. Your players come to a village and you want them to, like, explore an old barn that where, like, a cow gave birth to, like, a human. So they think it's like a demon fae thing happening or something. So one of the players is like, I want to go out into the woods. You can say, cool, roll a survival check. They roll a survival check. I get a 22. Okay. After walking around the woods for about 20 minutes, you feel with certainty that there is nothing strange in the woods. And maybe the darkness that this thing came from is not from the forest, but maybe from the farm or the town. Like, you can just stop them from doing it. Like, don't make their decision not matter, but you can cut them off at the pass if you know that you don't have anything there for them. Like open world doesn't need to mean there's always something there. Open world can mean sometimes there's not, and you don't need to spend an hour of time exploring that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's entirely reasonable. I also think that, like, again, there is an element of illusion of choice that is really valuable, right?
Yes.
Like, use the direction they want to head in as set dressing for just whatever next thing you need to tell them.
Yeah.
And I think this comes down to a lot of GMs prepare, especially in D&D, and I don't know why this seems to be more true in D&D than some other games, but especially in D&D, a lot of GMs prepare like, I'm going to write a story. I'm going to write a book. And then I'm going to expect my players to slot into that book. and they're going to progress linearly along the plot points that I've laid out within this book. Maybe it derives from world building, right? Where it's like, I'm going to create this whole world and I'm going to make sure that everything, every little detail is exactly in place, and they have to engage with it in that way, in that order, in order to uncover the secrets that they need in order to move forward. Those approaches to prep for tabletop RPGs will lead to consistent frustration, because it's very inflexible and it's a lot of work up front, frankly.
Yeah.
And so you get yourself coming and going. You're putting a lot of work into something that isn't the right kind of tool for the job. It's going to be very inflexible. A much better hack to prep is to list out the things that you need to accomplish as a GM. Give yourself a little task list. I need to make sure by the end of this session that they know that the fighter's grandmother is somehow implicated in this cow giving birth to this baby, right? I need to foreshadow that it wasn't actually their grandmother. It was a hag, made to look like their grandmother. So I need to foreshadow that something weird is happening there.
Mm-hmm.
I need to ensure that they have these magic items in order to be able to engage with this encounter. And I need to make sure they get the map to the hag's lair, right? And you've got 5 bullet points. The rest of it is just coming up with what the fucking tavern looks like that they decide that they want to walk into, right? It's just like coming up with a basket of things for them to potentially interact with and following them where they go and moving shit to be where they want it to be. And it'll be a lot less work and it'll be a lot more flexible for you. And you won't get this situation where you feel like your players are like ignoring the plot or wandering away, because as long as they have a motivation that's aligned with your understanding of their motivation, they're going to be going in that direction.
Yeah,
and you just push it in front of them.
I think the real reason why players do that is because the player has motivation of, I want to see what the dungeon master has ready, as opposed to them having a character have any sort of motivation. Like, it is very much the player thinking like a player when they're like, I want to go into a random direction. And it took me a while to deal with that. I did reach a point one time where I decided I was going to run White Plume Mountain, which is like a very old adventure that got redone for 5e, because I just wanted to run like a big complicated, I just wanted to bring a big classic dungeon. So I told everybody that, and one of my players very early on, like it was the first session, people were talking about like, how should we get there? One of the players was like, well, we can go anywhere we want. Like, that's the whole point. Like Cinder, that's the way Cinder's runs the games. We can do whatever we want. Like, we could just decide to go somewhere else. And I literally cut him off, and I was like, dude, that's not what I said for this. Like, I said for this campaign, I want to run White Plume Mountain. So if you want to run somewhere else, that's not what we're doing. I'm running White Plume Mountain. I've planned White Plume Mountain. We talked about it. That's what I'm running. So no, for right now, you can't go anywhere. Like, we all agreed that this is the campaign we're going to do. So this is the campaign we're going to do. What somebody said, what's your name? Somebody said they sent a question. You did not send a question. So if you sent a question, you either sent it to the wrong form or you didn't finish filling out the form, but there is no question from you that got posted in the form. But I do appreciate the effort.
I want to dial in. Brandon Green just said something in chat, and I want to bounce off of it because I've got a rally thing for it that I absolutely love.
Sure.
The small details sometimes drive the characters. Don't describe the beautiful lady in the red dress if you don't want them to look at her.
Yeah.
First of all, poetically put, incredibly accurate, very, very true. Some of the most fun I've ever had with making my players feel like I'm up to a long con is leaning into that, putting descriptions into the world, waiting for them to bite on one, and then paying that off later. And there's a great example, very minor spoilers, great example from Rally. At one point in a flashback scene, I described a woman as having violet eyes, and Emily would not shut up about it. Kept being like, that's got to mean something. He's up to some shit. That's got to mean something. Why focus on the eyes? Why put attention on the eyes? I didn't mean anything by it. It was just set dressing, right? I was just trying to make the thing feel a type of way. But because Emily was interested in it, I put a few more breadcrumbs out to see if they would continue to chase it. Y'all did. And I eventually paid it off by making that person in the flashback the mother of a prominent NPC that the characters had a pretty complex relationship with. And
But that
was
wouldn't
it
have
the
happened
biggest-
if she didn't get fucking pigeonholed
Excited about it.
on that vibe because of
I
you,
would've let
because
it
of your
go.
description. Yeah.
I would have let it go. I absolutely would have let it go, because who cares, right? And
Yeah.
and that kind of emergent storytelling is so much fun. And it leads to the kind of thing that like lives in your players' heads forever. And it honestly, that instance was probably fine, right? But if you pull it off in the right instance, it makes you look fucking brilliant. It makes you
Yeah.
look like you've been up to some shit for forever.
For sure.
So just like, don't be afraid to throw detail out into the world, and then the minute your players latch onto it, understand that that's plot relevant now, and it's up to you to figure out how. And you've got time.
Yeah. Noticing the thing that your players latch onto and making that the thing that matters makes your players think that was the plan all along, which is a fun little trick.
Exactly.
We got one more late question, Pat. If you were down to stay for it. But if you don't want to, no worries. Honestly, it's another one where it's like I think that this is something that we talk about a bunch. Also, you apologize for English not being your first language. You are writing with less spelling mistakes than half of the native English speakers, so don't feel bad. Combat and narrative feel a bit disconnected from each other for me. How to improve both by making them work together instead of feeling alienated as soon as the combat starts. Sometimes it's hard to mix the tiles/actions with the story. The strategic aspect of the game sometimes breaks immersion and creativity. I love both aspects, but I don't know if I'm the only one that isn't able to connect combat with the moment theatrically. Feels like I'm playing two different games. I don't think this is a just you issue. I think this is a fundamental issue with D&D, which is that D&D is people figuring out how to basically build their own role-playing game on top of a battle simulator. And when you are role-playing, you're kind of figuring out how to do it on your own, because D&D does not have a lot of mechanics for that. And then as soon as you start using the D&D mechanics, it becomes very much a battle simulator. Two thoughts. One is that you can encourage your players to describe the actions they're taking. An easy a way that I do this often with newer players is if a player says, I cast Fireball, I just say, what does it look like when you cast Fireball? Does your Fireball a different color? Just get them to start trying to think about their vibes so that hopefully they start to describe it a bit. The other thing that I think can help is if you are running a simpler combat where the goal is not... These are two separate ideas. One, if you can run theater of the mind combat, it can be more theatrical, and you can sort of just and stuff more. As soon as you're not worrying about battle map stuff, when a player says, hey, can I get all of those guys in a fog cloud? You just say yes, and then you just move on, and they just describe the cool thing. So, like, using theater of the mind helps with that a lot. And then the other thing is not losing the character stakes in the combat. And this is something that Pat loves, which is that if you make the goal of combat not winning combat, but some character-driven goal, then they will be better at staying in character during combat. So, like, let's say... you could have a combat situation where it's like, all right, there's an evil Fae caravan that's tormenting a community. You have to go kill them all. Great. You could also have one where there's like an evil Fae caravan and like you have to save somebody from it. And and if they notice that you're attacking them, then there is a timer for how long you can get to save them before the Fae start to kill that person or turn them into a demon or whatever. So like, make a goal that is not winning, so that make a goal that is a plot goal for the combat, and have combat essentially be what is happening because somebody is trying to prevent you from accomplishing that goal, or because you are trying to prevent someone from accomplishing their goal.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that D&D is at odds with, I think, a fundamental truth of good storytelling, which is you fight when you can't not fight anymore. Yeah. Right? And that's it. That's that's literally a screenwriting tool, is that you devolve into violence when words won't work, when you can't not fight anymore. It's also a musical theater thing. You sing only when you can't not sing anymore. In 5e, the point of the game is fighting. 90% of your tools are about fighting. The game is set up around, at least theoretically, an experience loop that you gain by splashing bandits. And that's the point of the system. And so this is where D&D becomes a game that's kind of at odds with itself in the way that most people play it in, kind of 2024.
Welcome to the winery.
And it's a design flaw, and you kind of have to overcome it by having the GM patch it, like a lot of other design flaws. And those are all great examples of how you can do that, right?
Yeah.
Is you figure out what is happening that makes it so that you can't not fight. Fighting is not the goal. You just have to fight in order to achieve the thing.
Yeah.
And I think if you can land that, it really, really helps. Also, just to pile on a couple of other things, have conversations with players and characters. Ask them how they're feeling. It's a lot easier to break the mundanity of strategy than it is to break the energy of like a high-paced role-play interaction. Break up the tactical and strategic conversations, the moving of things, the thinking about spells and placing spells and whatever. Break it up with just like, what does this remind you of?
Yeah.
When was the first time you did something like this? Just get to know their characters a little bit better. And I think you'll find that that'll start paying off in a loop where the players are looking for those moments too.
Yeah. Brandon says, when are you guys doing another one of these? I post my schedule in my Discord every Sunday, and I try to post it on YouTube when I remember, but I haven't because I forgot. But we'll probably, I don't know if Pat will want to join me for another one, hopefully. But I usually do one of these call-in type shows like either every week or every other week. So I'll probably do one next week. You can also just re-ask. You can also ask more questions in the chat. Debarshi says, what's the difference between an orc with a C and an orc with a K? An orc with a K is an orc from a different fandom called Warhammer 40K. And they are a completely different species from fantasy orcs. And they're really intense and they're really cool. And if you want to experience some really wacky world building, take some time and deep dive the orcs of Warhammer 40K. They are my favorite part of that universe, and you can pretty much learn about them without learning about anything else if you're not interested in anything else, because you can just learn about them isolated. Like, you don't need to learn about the politics of all the other species or people or whatever. You can just be like,
thank God,
orcs cool. The other thing about the Warhammer 40K universe is it's very grimdark. It's sort of like the definition of grimdark, but also the orcs.
That's where the word comes from, isn't it?
I think it might be where the word comes from. But here's the other thing: is the orcs are the only part of it that's not grimdark. They are funny. So if it's kind of fun because from everyone's perspective, other than the orcs, they're really terrifying. But from the orcs' perspective, or from us as the audience, there's a lot of humor in them based on the way they function in that universe, which makes them extra cool because everyone is having a really bad time in the Warhammer 40K universe, except for orcs, and they are living their best lives, and they're having a party. They're just having a fucking party, and they're loving it. They're loving every second
They're also
of it.
very like London coded in the way that they speak.
Yeah, they speak very. They're like very Cockney British, but like Cockney British with like very broken sentence structure and very simple words. Yeah, they're great. They're great.
Yeah.
Oh. All right, friends.
We wrapping up?
I think we're gonna wrap up. It's 9/11. Wonderful
Never
time.
forget.
Never forget. And I got to get ready for this show I'm gonna do later tonight.
Amazing.
Pat, thanks so much for being here, man. Anything you want to shout out before I say so long farewell?
I mean, listen, we've referenced it a couple of times. I know Cinder pulled up the website earlier, but if you didn't catch it, Cinder and I do a podcast together called Unbalanced Encounters. You can go to unbalancedencounters.com. Our first season is called Rally. Cinder plays an ever-evolving automaton.
I'm a golem, basically. Yeah.
That is an incredible amount of fun. It's very heartfelt, very funny. And also, we're almost done. Which is a crazy thing. We're almost done with our first season with Rally. And so, now's a pretty good time. If you started listening now, you might get caught up by the time that the final episode airs.
That's true.
And then be on that train for when we start our new stuff in 2025, which we're very excited about. So unbalancedcounters.com.
Just as another elevator pitch, if you've ever wondered, I wonder what Cinder is like as a player. I wonder what Patrick is like as a dungeon master, because at this point you guys are pretty familiar with him too. check it out. Like it's a good start of that. And then also later on, I start running some one shots and mini arcs, so you can also get a little taste of me as a dungeon master. But
Yeah, it's very good stuff.
you know, one thing at a time. Cool, man. Pat, I'm gonna hang up on you now and say goodbye. But any
Okay.
final thoughts before I hang up on you?
No,
All right.
love you guys. Have
Love
a good
you.
one.
Bye. All right, let's hang up on that glorious Tyrannosauri, folks. Tomorrow is a big day. Tomorrow is the Silly Magic Items Taken Seriously stream. It is going to be really fun. All of the submission forms are already up in the Discord, so you can post stuff to that. I haven't looked at how many we were getting. Hopefully a bunch, and it should be a good time. The UI for the site is messed up. All right, I don't know what to do about that. What's messed up about it? It might just be messed up on your phone. Oh, it might. Yeah, I don't. It's probably because the link is it's a desktop link. So if you like type Unbalanced Encounters in your phone, you will find yourself on the mobile version. And my goodness, will it be glorious? Because the mobile we do it does normally work. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What am I looking for? What the fuck am I looking for? Oh, this is what I'm looking for. All right, friends, you guys are lovely. Have an amazing night. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Be good to each other. Thanks so much for hanging. You know, feed your pets, etc. And I love you. And I think you're so cool. You should be happy with your universe. Let's see everybody who supports the channel. Let's look at them. Let's look at them. Who are they?
About you leaving me. I don't know who I'd be. Would everything